Good evening. I call to order the August 12th, 2020 business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in the audience to silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Ms. Bolton.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like everyone to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates? Ms. Bolton?
Present.
Mrs. Bowers?
Present.
Mr. Lindy? Mr. Messer?
Present.
Mr. Morosky?
Here.
President Jones?
Here. Thank you. Members of the public who wish to be heard during the board meeting must raise their hand, and to speak during the first, you must raise your hand during the first 10 minutes after the start of this meeting. So please do so now if you desire to speak. Hearing of the public will directly follow the superintendent's presentation. Individuals who raise their hands after the first 10 minutes of the meeting will not be recognized to speak during this meeting. Okay, we don't have any general minutes to approve today, so we'll go ahead. Ms. Bowers is in transition. She's on the broadcast, but not able to present the minutes. So I'm going to ask either Mr. Morosky or Mr. Messer, whichever one wants to do it, if you would present the Student Achievement Committee report.
I can, it's up to you, Ryan. Whatever you prefer, Ryan. What do you want to do it or you want me to do it? Cool. Well, thank you. On behalf of Chair Bowers, it's my honor to give a report out from the Student Achievement Committee, which met on Friday, August 7th at 2 p.m. via Blue Jeans video conference. Initially, we got an ACT update for the 2021 school year. The administration will do an update on graduation and graduation numbers at October 2nd, 2020. I believe Mr. Messer had asked for that, and so we will hear more about that in October when we have firmer data. Mr. Justin Leach, testing director for the district, updated our committee on a summary of the spring 2020 state ACT results. Our average composite score was 5 years of testing, and we looked at the percentage of students meeting a 3 or 4. The committee expressed concerns about the gap between Black and white students. There were some large disparities in the composite score. Deputy Amat reported due to the beefing up of the curriculum, the district discontinued test prepping last year, and we saw a gain in our scores. So I think that it warrants putting a pin in. So while there was a disparity between white and Black, which there always is because every system is plagued with racism in our country, the numbers were better for both groups. Black students were performing higher generally, so were white students. And so we inquired as to if they had any initial hunches as to why, and Ms. Bolton will be happy to know that the answer was board-approved curricula. Out of student achievement the past few years, this board will recall there was a number of new curricula sort of standardized across district, and Ms. Amat also noted that new curricula plus, doing away with just like explicit test prep, but actual teaching and learning, imagine that, the scores went up. So that is good news there. Let's see, ACT testing updates, more. The state of Ohio funds an ACT administration for each high school student during their high school career. CPS administers the ACT state-funded test in February, March each year. Some efforts to reduce gaps for English language learners, or ELL, and students with disabilities was discussed. Assistant Superintendent Susan Bunty updated our committee on district data, where gaps are occurring, and strategies put in place to address literacy gaps. The presentation also included information about early literacy work with the University of Cincinnati, post-secondary transition for students with disabilities, lots and lots of other focus areas, intense focus on listening and speaking, and use of consistent progress monitoring tools across the district. That full report is available in the board office and upon request. The committee advised the administration, this was an action item that the rest of the board should know about. We advised the administration to just talk with our lobbyists about delaying state testing next year due to a gap that is occurring in education. Of course, the state testing was waived this year. It was our thinking that while the state hasn't given any real hint as to where they're leaning, it would be prudent to begin having those conversations and socializing the idea in Columbus of potentially looking at delaying again, because as we know, there is ostensibly going to be a gap in learning this school year. There certainly has already been because of the loss of last year. Moving to the end here, credit recovery curriculum adoption. The administration reported the following information about credit recovery curriculum. A request for proposal curriculum has been submitted. Requests for proposals have been submitted, rather. The credit recovery platform providing ready-built courses aligned to Ohio and district standards and guidelines. The platform needs to be aligned to the district's content area. The platform needs to provide opportunities for students to recover missing or lost credits. Tier 1 instruction serving a diverse array of learners, and there needs to be stakeholder involvement. The Credit Recovery Implementation Plan, August 12th, notification to principals regarding change in credit recovery platform. August 17th to 20th, go live for virtual CDA and training for virtual, September 1st through 4th. Training and launch district-wide. Teachers taught the new platform, students enrolled in courses. A full presentation is available in the board office upon request. And lastly, naming of a school. The superintendent reported that she spoke with Ellen Gilligan about the naming of one of our buildings after former Governor Jack Gilligan. Most everybody on this board has been around for that conversation in some way, shape, or form. It keeps coming back up. And Ms. Mitchell let Ms. Gilligan know that there were three options: Cincinnati Digital Academy or CDA, Mozart property in Westwood, or the newly acquired Lighthouse School in Madisonville. Ms. Mitchell also noted there were few schools named after people of color, which we had found, I believe, in our audit of those schools. Ms. Bolton's leadership asked for that in SAC a couple years ago or last year. And one thing we also noted that I noted in our meeting, Ms. Bolton, was that you brought up the serious lack of buildings named for just women. In fact, I believe we found there's two for sure, and that's it. Of course, Hayes Porter is man and woman, but just woman, there's only two. So we discussed that, and we discussed naming another facility after a white male, and what that means and how we need to be attentive to that. The committee and the superintendent discussed the recommendations. Ms. Mitchell recommended naming the Digital Academy after Mr. Gilligan. We agreed with her recommendation and will recommend that location to the Gilligan family after we recommend it to the full board right now. Committee member Messer brought up an amazing point in that, there's a real possibility of families wanting buildings named after their members to provide funding to make the buildings resourceful and as great as possible. We also talked about how while CDA wasn't top of the list, perhaps for the family, that this is a real opportunity. Our Cincinnati Digital Academy, all eyes are on it right now. And maybe it's an opportunity to also garner some additional support and resources as we beef up our digital options. I present the minutes as written and hope for passage.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Board members have questions or comments. Ms. Bolton?
Yes, I would request of board staff, if they can, to send me the ACT report. I think overall it sounds like an improvement, but yet a lot of work yet to be done. Particularly interested in breaking it down by gender, because that often is part of the issue as well. I'm strongly in support of the Digital Academy not only being named for the governor, who has, and I'm certainly not predisposed to name anything for another male, since I raised the issue about females, and I think that has to be addressed. And certainly those folks of minority status and those folks of color that have been such an important part of CPS, I think we do need to review some of the names that are on our buildings to make sure that they do represent the values. But that's for another day to worry about that. But I'm very supportive of using this opportunity for the governor, who was not only a lifelong educator, but also a World War II veteran and someone that spent his life in political life in Cincinnati City Council, and also became governor and made, believe it or not, the income tax possible, which is keeping us alive here some 40 years later. And then thought that being on the school board was important enough for a retired governor. So I'd be supportive of that. And also, I applaud what you all are doing about maybe expanding the role of the Digital Academy. I mean, this should become a state school, frankly, something that's attracting statewide. And I really applaud finding all the different ways that we can actually make distance learning positive and inclusive. So, and I think if it gets bigger and bigger and a bigger platform and whatever, I think I do believe that the governor's name needs to be on it if possible. Thank you. Great job.
Any other questions or comments about the report? Okay, I'll just add also, I thought this not surprisingly, but I was very amazed that that these minutes were very meaty. You all got a lot accomplished at this meeting. I agree wholeheartedly with the what Ms. Bolden is saying about renaming and our need to diversify and all that. And I like Mr. Messer's recommendation. I agree, and I just wanted to add that in the 21st century, that's where we need to focus on digital learning and building that capacity. And I know we've done some work on that already, and I just am adding my opinion that I think we have a lot of potential to really be a model for that. So I'm very appreciative. So you all, that was great. And I also would suggest Ms. Bolden asked for the report on the ACT scores. Please, we need our staff to make sure that that all board members get it when they send it out. Okay, so and I know that they're listening in, so I'm sure they'll hear us. Okay, all right. So if we move on, Mr. Morosky, you also get the policy report.
All right. And just to make sure the superintendent has the direction she needs, we are then, when we pass these minutes, then we're fine with letting Ms. Gilligan know that we'd like to. I didn't hear any opposition. Is that fair to say that we'll let her know that CDA could be the Gilligan Digital Academy? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Can I just add to that?
Of the policy. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and the only caveat is, I think taking a moment in between, the communication to really think big and imagine and serve it up to say, we really want this to be a world-class. I mean, of course, a year ago, maybe it wasn't talked about. I have heard more people, as I said at our meeting, talk about Digital Academy than I've heard any of our schools in the past 2 months. And so, it is the future for a variety of reasons. And so if we imagine what would it take to make this a world class and kind of put a framework of a budget, then we're going to say, hey, and we'd like to have your partnership. This is a very connected family politically throughout the country and then at federal and local levels. How could we engage with them to really make something that family would be proud and say, can you help us raise $1.5 million or whatever that amount is that would really make this something that of course they would be proud of, but that will take our district to the next level. And as Ms. Bolton said, be a leader statewide and nationwide in how you do digital learning.
Thank you. Okay, I believe Ms. Bates, I saw your hand. Did you want to have a comment?
I totally agree with Mr. Messer, and not that our schools are for sale, but this certainly is an opportunity to solicit some funding for the CDA in Governor Gilligan's name. We can reach out through some fundraising efforts, possibly through ABC. I know that I contacted the executive director there, and he's more than willing to help us set up a fundraising campaign in Governor Gilligan's name. But I think we need to grab this opportunity to honor the governor, not just with naming a building that is kind of a static thing, but to use this opportunity to raise funds so that this school can be state of the art with the additional funding. So I don't know if this would be an assignment at the end of the meeting, but I feel very firmly that we do need to move forward with fundraising in Governor Gilligan's name.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bolton, last comment. We're going to move on past these minutes. Okay.
I hear you. Last comment. We don't want to forget that Governor Gilligan's daughter indeed was in the Obama cabinet and is the architect, if you will, of the Affordable Care Act. So there's a nationwide network in respect to her and her father, and of course the whole of Obama legacy.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like Ms. Bates is suggesting maybe in assignments we might have a more formal assignment. So we'll move on. Mr. Morosky, Policy Committee.
Thank you, President Jones. Policy Committee also met on Friday, August 7th at 3:30 p.m. via Blue Jeans video conference. We began by continuing our discussion with new policy 5321, which would be the requirement to wear masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19. There was a lot of feedback at our last meeting, all of which we passed along in committee to General Counsel and Assistant General Counsel Stephanie Scott. Specifically that there needed to be language in the policy to determine when, if, and how often students would get breaks with wearing the masks. A few other items. I know Ms. Bolton, I remember being outdoors or sporting events. We also brought up in committee adding language regarding just any sort of event where people in CPS would be congregating. So you'll see reflected in the minutes some added language. I won't insult your intelligence and read it all to you, but for the edification of the public, masks will be required on any field trip or off-campus experience. Of course, this is hoping that those will be able to happen at some point. Students and staff required while riding any CPS provided transportation inclusive of metro, required for visitors and spectators. Sporting events where 6-foot distancing cannot be maintained. The district shall also make reasonable efforts to accommodate younger students, students with sensory sensitivities, and students with disabilities. The committee agreed that with the recommended changes and later on in the agenda, we will ask for adoption of this policy. Continued discussion about new policy 5466, identification of students at risk of not qualifying for high school diploma. You'll recall that we had this resolution the last meeting, and Ms. Bowers still had concerns with some of the wording, particularly regarding mental health services. So we shelved it, kicked it back to committee, and combed through it again. Ms. Bowers was pleased with where we got, and as an action, we were going to recommend the changes via resolution again today, later on in the agenda, just to highlight some of Ms. Bowers' concerns, and as a reminder, there was language regarding the superintendent developing and implementing procedures to identify students who are at risk of not qualifying for a high school diploma or being able to provide mental health services. She further expressed concern about who would have access to the data and student records and if it would be a barrier for students. Mr. Hoying reported that the district partners would provide the mental health services, and the superintendent or designee will just identify and implement additional instructional support services. So he amended the language, which you will see in the policy, and again, we'll ask for approval later in the meeting. We also discussed a resolution allowing students to graduate from their home high school if they choose Digital Academy. There's Digital Academy again for 2021 school year. I thought this was really cool. I will be presenting a resolution later for this. So this is only for seniors who, for one reason or another, enrolled in Cincinnati Digital for this senior year. And just again, for the public, the reason that it's significant is Cincinnati Digital Academy is its own school. So people go there for the tenure of their high school career, and they get a diploma from the Cincinnati Digital Academy. So this year, we might have students from Hughes, Taft, Walnut, wherever, that are doing their final year at CDA, but we would like them to be able to get a diploma from Hughes, Taft, Walnut, or wherever. So General Counsel Hoying drafted up a resolution that would say the board is supportive of this. I asked Dan Hoying at our meeting if we are asking for forgiveness instead of permission, and he said yes, and that in his professional opinion, and because the ODE hasn't said anything about this yet, but in his professional opinion, not to speak for Dan, of course, I don't have any legal expertise, but that this would be a show of support from the board and really help our case. He also didn't express any real concerns that ODE would really balk at this. So we'll present that later. It's in your minutes. I'm sure you all saw the resolution, so if you have questions, we can answer them. And then we brought up the anti-racism policy again. It will be on our agenda until it is finished. It was a great discussion. Just a couple of the high-level things. I passed along everybody's concern from our full board meeting, and namely shorten it to focus on anti-racism and widen the definition of systemic racism and have it be more inclusive of adult to adult, peer to peer, administrator, teacher, teacher, not just the young people. And so Assistant General Counsel Scott reported she will do a presentation on October 2nd with all of those updates. The committee also addressed an action item from our July 10th meeting about the working group that Mr. Messer had brought up. And so at this meeting, we formalized that, and we tasked Assistant General Counsel Scott to convene this working group, that there would be use of a facilitator, consist of 21 members. It was a number that we determined was big, but not too big and not too small. Include parents, students, staff, various community groups, NAACP, Urban League, Greater Cincinnati Foundation suggested, those were just suggested groups, and that it needed to be community driven. We then suggested that this group, it would be ideal that this group meet before our September 4th, 2020 policy committee in order for the group to present at that meeting or to give us findings. Assistant General Counsel Scott and Communications Director Krista Boyle are sort of managing this process of getting the group together. So if there are questions about that and how it's moving along, hopefully one of them is on the call and could address it, but that's where we left it. We tasked them with getting the group together and with meeting before our next policy committee. And that is it. So I present the minutes as written and hope for passage.
Okay, any questions or comments? Short responses, please. Ms. Bolton.
I need some clarification about the working group. How is it to be an extension of the policy committee, an extension of the board? Will it be a public committee that requires notice, much as the STEP committee did? Just so we're playing it right. I hate to also have a list that we create as to who gets to be on it. Right from the get-go, that starts to be weird. Instead of with the STEP committee, it basically was whoever signed up. And it, of course, had to be noticed. And a lot of these working groups, just like the property tax one out of Cincinnati City Council, end up, if they're a creation of the public entity like us, and Dan and whoever may know better than that, but it seems to me that, only the board can write and adopt policy. But if we need community input, I still don't understand why there needs to necessarily be a working group, but I'll defer to you all. But I need clarification as to whether or not it needs to be noticed and whether it should ever be so exclusive that we create it instead of it happens more organically. So those would be my comments.
Yeah, those are good comments, and I'm going to address a couple of them. Then, if it's all right with committee member Messer, kick it to him because I know he's been adamant about it, and I agree with him. I think we should have a working group, and yes, I think it should be noticed, and I don't think we should be picking anybody to be on it, which is why it was assigned to Ms. Boyle and Ms. Scott to sort of manage that, and the use of a facilitator for it. So I think idea being very similar to the STEP committee. And again, I think Ryan's better for this than I am anyway, because he was also part of that and headed that up. So as a way to get that feedback directly from the public. But if it's all right, Vice President Messer, I'll kick it to you to talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I think, this is, I think as we talked about it originally, we just talked about how important this is, but also this could be something that becomes a benchmark for lots of other districts to follow, that maybe some people think it's the right thing to do and they're thinking about it. I think having us have a well-baked policy, and I think part of that is including voices that represent all the various stakeholder groups that are part of CPS, whether you're a staff member, whether you're a parent, whether you're a student. This has to be meaningful for them so that anything that we can do through this policy to bring equity for every stakeholder group, I think is really the best thing out of this. So that was just the idea of making sure that we talked framework of these are the stakeholder groups that we want it to be related to and accountable to, but then to kind of trust the process in that individuals would be identified for that group from those various stakeholder groups and kind of run a process versus, trying to get in the weeds of who was doing what.
Okay. Other questions or comments? I just want to add just real short comment. I think I'll also defer to the committee on that particular aspect of it, but also just for consideration, one of the things that I found, especially as we did with the FC process, community forums are also a good way of gathering, engaging a wider spectrum of opinions. And so if I would urge you all just to, consider that, put that on your plate. I mean, our STEP process in strategic planning worked out real well. But I also think the addition of having a wider spread of community input is also worthy of that. A committee is somewhat limiting because even though you try to get the most diverse perspective, it's still rather limiting. But anyway, that's just my thought. Okay, but I think it's good work overall, and I saw a lot of improvement from the first draft, so happy with that. Okay, anything else then? Okay, all right, I need a motion to approve the committee reports.
So moved.
Thanks. Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved as presented. Thank you. All righty, Superintendent Mitchell, please introduce this evening's presentations.
Could we do kudos for a second?
Kudos is going to follow. We're going to do the presentation first with the hearing of the public, and then we'll do kudos and retirements, if that's okay.
Follow your lead.
All right.
Thank you, President Jones. So this evening, I'm going to provide an update to our reopening plan for the upcoming school year. And then following my presentation will be an employee engagement presentation to really highlight the work that's being done to support and engage our employees as we move into the opening of the beginning of the school year. So for those of you who may have received our postcard, you can see that we had a beautiful postcard that was sent out to our families as well as our staff members, backpacks on, laptops open, and futures bright. And so we're excited about the upcoming school year. So over the course of 2 weeks, we have been holding town halls for employees, parents, and athletes. So we wanted to be able to really hear from the community in addition to the hearing of the public, and then have some targeted, very specific town halls for different groups. And so we've held 6 employee town hall meetings, and those are all hour meetings apiece for principals, central office, all employees at every school has been invited to participate. And you can see that for our employees, we had over 3,000 people participate. Then for our parents, we had 3 different parent groups in terms of town halls, and we heard from over 2,000 parents. And also we had an athletic town hall, and you can see that we had over 200 people respond to that. And so the format for the town hall, many of the board members did drop in and check it out, but we provide a very short presentation, an update to the reopening of our school year, and then offered the majority of the time left for parents, employees, and students to be able to ask us questions and also to be able to give us ideas. So it was a great listening and answering session, and we were able to get some really wonderful ideas to inform our work moving forward. So I do want to provide an update regarding the student orientations as we think about welcoming our young people back to school. And so I think it's really important that we highlight the fact that school will be in session. Cincinnati Public Schools, we are open and we are operating for this upcoming school year. We had planned to have face-to-face orientations and based upon, let me go back and say the why. We felt that it is important for teachers to be able to meet their students, and in many cases, especially at the elementary level, if the student doesn't or had not been rotating to different teachers, then that student wouldn't know their upcoming teacher. And at the high school level, it's possible that the student would have some of the same teachers, but for those transitional grades from 8th grade to 9th grade, maybe you wouldn't know your teachers. And so we thought it was a really good idea to be able to connect our kids to their teachers and also really take some time to go over what are the expectations and then also what are the practices that we will use in distance learning. And so that was what our plan was. And based upon feedback from parents, from staff members, teachers, and principals, we just moved to a virtual orientation. And so there are 2 components to this. And so the virtual orientations will begin the week of August the 24th. So there are 2 components. The first component is a pickup of materials at schools. And so this is a drive-through situation similar to our graduations. And so schools will have teachers send out information to their home room, identifying the time of their drive-through pickup. And so teachers will be out front being able to at least wave to their incoming class of students. And then the students will receive materials. So the type of materials they'll receive are textbooks, art supplies, school supplies. So we're going to send home a lot of supplies with our young people so that they really have the tools and the materials that they need to do well over this academic year. So that's one component. The second component is the virtual parent and student orientations. And so schools are working to schedule those with specific teachers as well as with grade level or teams of teachers who teach together to provide the parents and the teachers an orientation to the upcoming school year in terms of curriculum, books that are used, platforms that are used, and the expectations around submission of work as well as attendance. And so we're moving to a student orientation and parent orientation that will be virtual. And so that communication has gone out to our principals, and our principals are communicating that to our teachers and as well to the parents through a standard template that the district provided. There's also a letter that we'll be sending out that will come from me to the parents specifically about this virtual orientation. So I thought it might be interesting to give the board some idea in terms of other schools in this area. And so I was able to source this information from Hamilton County Education Service Center. So this organization, they work with superintendents and school districts within this region. And so it was reported last week on a call with Hamilton Education Center that a third of the schools are going back with a blended model similar to our A-B grouping. A third will be in person, and a third will start off fully remote. And so I just wanted the board to be able to see this information and to see where CPS lands in terms of the schools within this region. As we prepare for the opening of the school year, although we're starting in a remote or distance learning model, we want to make sure that our buildings are safe and that they are ready to be able to receive our staff. And so our schools have been working on the development of their safety plan. If you recall, we provided a template for the safety plans in terms of what has to be in that safety plan. The safety plans were then reviewed by central office. So principals came in and they met with the central office leaders to go over their plan. And then during this week, as well as last week, there were audits or walkthroughs that were conducted to be able to look to see if the components of the safety plan that were on paper are actually in existence within our schools. And so that work is being completed and will be finished in terms of the walkthroughs, will all be finished by August the 13th, which is tomorrow. In addition, what we're going to do is starting next week, we will have operational huddles that will be centered around the safety plan implementation in each school. Tomorrow, all staff members will receive a letter that will outline the 10 things that they should expect to see as it relates to safety when they return to work next week. So our teachers return to work in terms of in our buildings next Monday on the 17th, and then our civil service return over the span of that week starting on the 19th. And so we have a set of expectations that we want to make sure they're in place to ensure our staff that we are following protocols and we are being safe. In addition to those protocols in the letter, there will also be the phone number for the employee hotline. So we want employees to feel comfortable and safe to report practices that are in violation of the protocols that we have put into place. The last piece of information I want to be able to share with you is this is the epidemiology curve, and this is the report that I received from the City of Cincinnati Health Department today. And there were a series of questions that were asked by a board member for us to be able to address. And so I'll read what those questions are and then be able to respond to them. So one question that was raised is, how are we defining a downward trend? And so as you look at this epidemiology curve report, what we're looking at is from the day that we look at it, so from today's date or the last data point that we have, we count back 14 days. And we look to see if there is a downward trend in terms of decline for over that 14-day period, or if there's a flattening of the data over that 14-day period. And if you look, it's a little hard to tell, but I went through and I counted today, and I counted back 15 days from the last report, and the last report was on August the 11th. And we're about at the exact same place today as we were 15 days ago. What's important, though, to really pay attention to and to look at is the dotted line. And the dotted line represents 7 days of a moving average. And so you can see that over that dotted line is actually going down and starting to flatten. Now you will see a bit of a spike around the August the 7th. And quite honestly, we can't tell what that is. We don't know if that was a special cause or it's just variation in the system, but we're looking to see over a 14-day period, are we seeing a decline or a flattening of the data in terms of identified cases? So in this respect, we would say that the data is moving in the right direction. Another question that was asked was, how often do we get the positivity rate? And so the positivity rate, which takes into account cases that are identified through private providers as well as through the health department, we get that on a weekly basis, and it comes specifically from the health commissioner, Dr. Moore. And so we get that on a weekly basis. And so if we look at the positivity rate, we're still at 7%, and we want to be in the 5 to 6% range. But are we close? We are close, but close is relative in comparison to what? And so as we look at the positivity rate, we also have to consider how good or how bad is the testing system to be able to turn around the test results in a pretty rapid period. And so another data point that we're looking at, in addition to the positivity rate, are the number of days that it takes for us to get test results. And we're currently, it can range from 3 days up to 14 days. Our healthcare physicians have indicated to us that results that take over 3 days really aren't very applicable in terms of being helpful to identify whether or not it's safe for us to go back. Within a 14-day period, if it takes a person that long to get their results, they could be walking around for 14 days asymptomatic, infecting other people. And so obviously we want a much tighter time frame as it relates to getting the turnaround test results. The fourth piece of data that we looked at, and that is the levels 1 through 4 that go along with the color coding system out of the governor's office. And so we had been level 3, which is red. We are now excited to be able to say that we have dropped down to level 2, and so we're in the orange. However, we were advised by healthcare professionals to not get distracted by that level system. And so we explained, but that's what the public sees. They see red, they see orange, and so that's what people see and are concerned when they see red, when they see orange, and when they see purple. And so the example that was given to us is that there was a county in Ohio in which the county worked very hard to reduce the percent of confirmed cases in a nursing home. So that dropped dramatically. But then it made the data for the non-nursing home areas, neighborhoods, communities, look much higher, which kept them in a rating level 3, which was red. And so we were advised not to really place a ton of weight in terms of looking at that color coding system. But again, we still recognize that that is what our public sees and values that information. To the last question that I believe were 2 more questions, are we close or far away from where we want to be? And then the last question, are we trending in the right direction? So we are trending in the right direction as it relates to the governor's color coding system going from red to orange, going from level 3 to level 2. We're trending in the right direction. We are trending in the right direction as it relates to the epidemiology curve. You can see that that dotted line is flattening. And again, we cannot tell whether that little spike was a special cause, something specific that happened, or if it was just variation in the system. So we are moving in the right direction as it relates to our epidemiology curve. In terms of our positivity rate, we haven't seen a movement in that since we started to look at it, and since I started receiving the data in the last 2 weeks, we are still at 7%, and so that seems to be pretty stable. And again, we want to be at 5 to 6%, and we are not where we want to be in terms of the turnaround time for results for testing. So, in thinking about next steps in our work moving forward, last Friday, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with the city manager regarding some very specific demands that we have within Cincinnati Public Schools as it relates to support that we need from the city. So, number 1 is more testing and ongoing testing for CPS staff members. We want testing that's more frequently than the one shop testing or the one time that took place at our pop-up location. So we want frequent testing, considering the number of employees that we have and the number of students that we impact and families and communities that we impact. We believe that we are a special situation or a special case, and so we believe that we need more ongoing testing. In addition, we need faster turnaround time in terms of test results from the health department. They are inundated right now, and they are really at the mercy of the labs to be able to provide the results, because they don't have labs that provide their own test results. And so we need a faster turnaround time, though, as it relates to testing. We also need assistance with tracking and tracing in terms of in our buildings, contact tracing and tracking for suspected as well as confirmed cases. We would also like to have notices that will come from the city to alert us when businesses have an influx of people who are infected with COVID-19, because those places may be places where our families work. And so we want to be aware so that we can make sure that we have precautions in place to be able to handle our classrooms and our schools in a very safe manner. And then the last request that we have at this point in time from the city is to help lead a campaign to get our kids back in school faster, which means that we need an all-out campaign surrounding everyone wearing a mask, 6 feet of social distancing, staying home when you feel sick, quarantining if you come back from one of those hot spots that has been identified by the governor. And we believe that this is critically important, especially as we approach Labor Day. We anticipate that people will be out and about during Labor Day, and that might create the opportunity to spread COVID-19 throughout our community. And so that's an area that we really want to focus on in terms of a campaign. We also believe that one of our next steps would be for Cincinnati Public to hold a meeting with the city manager, the city health commissioner, as well as Children's Hospital to work together in a concerted effort to help reduce the spread of COVID and to be able to allow our students to get back into school quicker. So that concludes my report, and I believe that I've answered all the questions that were posed to us during our last board meeting, as well as emailed to myself. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, board members, do you have questions or comments about the superintendent's report? Okay, I can't see hands. Let me
I'm
think.
here.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Mr. Messer.
Yes. Well, first, I think it goes for all of us. I don't care what organization you're in. These are not easy times to lead, and I just want to thank you, because I know that you and the team are putting in countless hours. I mean, just doing all the town halls, the multiple parent town halls, all the employee town halls. There are literally thousands of people out there with questions that are going to be nuances, and I just want to thank you for everything you're doing. So I'll just start there. The second part is, I think one thing we probably get a lot, I think if I pulled up my Facebook Messenger, a lot of the questions there or other places speak to, hey, any idea how things are trending, any idea when we might actually be able to go back, any information you have, blah, blah, blah. And I know I talked about it at least at one of the meetings, but thinking through what a simple graphic that could show here are our measurements that we're looking at, and a dashboard to say we're on target or not. And it can be something very easy visually, and to say this will be, of course, a feed in addition, this dashboard, in addition to input from healthcare professionals, et cetera. And something that a once a week quick video that could be updated, just to say, hey, I'm going to get my lunchtime with Laura update on where we are at the schools. And I think it would, and anytime we got those requests, we could send them to that. Hey, the most recent update is now on the website. And it just will keep everyone, because I think what I've heard is I'm not as bothered that we have these changes. I just need an update along the way. And I actually get that a little bit from my spouse. Hey, what's the next step? And I think just being able to say, or how are things going with the numbers? I just put that out there to see if that had been considered as a way to keep the community at large and our families and our staff all up to date.
But if I can speak to that, I think that's a fabulous idea. And I am going to ask Sarah and Jeremy to pipe in regarding the dashboard that we are building. I do believe that it would be helpful to have a healthcare professional be a part of those weekly updates with me to be able to really help break down the data and also to give credibility to the work. So obviously this is not my area of expertise. I spend a lot of times at night and on phone calls trying to make sure that I understand the information so I can answer all the questions that come my way. But it's not our core business. And so just in terms of credibility and also people who can actually go out and have the time to do some research and dig to come up with the very best answers, as our physicians who are working with us, that's what they do. So I posed questions to them today and they said, okay, let me go research this and find this out for you. And so I think it's a fabulous idea. So we'll definitely explore. And then I'll ask Jeremy and Sarah if you would talk about the dashboard that we are creating.
Okay, Jeremy, I'll jump in, but you can also jump in if you want. So Jeremy's team is working with a developer to develop a COVID-19 dashboard that will help track our confirmed or suspected cases within our buildings, and that's for staff and for students. It also has an address matching algorithm to determine if there are other family members living in the same building as a confirmed case. And it also has some mapping features. We expect to be able to use that with our school nurses as well as our environmental health and safety staff. And I do also want to speak to Mr. Messer's idea. So Krista Boyle and I have been working on a way to give a public update of the 3 main data points that we're watching, and we want to be able to update that on a weekly basis.
Excellent.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Bowers, followed by Ms. Bolton, followed by Mr. Lindy.
Thank you, Superintendent Mitchell. That was a lot of good information, a lot of questions that were answered, particularly like the virtual orientation. It sounds like that was a pressing issue, and the decision to change to that was a good idea. The question I do have is regarding the pickup of materials. In orientation, I think of open house, I think of back to school kind of event. Not all families show up for that. So what happens if a family has not or does not show up to get their materials? Is that a building level decision to figure out how to get that to the family? And the virtual parent orientation on how to do Schoology or Google or what have you. And I know the building administrations are going to be coordinating that, but just to make sure that people are getting in contact, I'm thinking that there's like a alternate plan if that doesn't occur. Also, the 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3, that puts a lot of things into perspective for me about how other districts are doing around us. And I love when you said you had a conversation with the city manager as to how the city can help us get our kids back to school quickly. That number 5, regarding the commercial or whatever you're saying that needs to go out soon, I think that's very powerful, and I do like that because everybody wants us to go back to school, so that would be very helpful for us. But I do like that number 5. I like all of them, but that was key for me to saying, hey, this is a collaboration. We need your help. So what regarding the virtual orientations or pickups?
Yes. So we will work to make sure that our kids get the materials. If that means that we have to go to their homes and drop them off on the porch, so we are committed to doing that. One thing, this is a little bit of a kudos, but just to show you how committed we are. I was recently found out that one of our staff members did something that I thought was extraordinary, and it should be in the kudos, and I should have sent it, but I forgot. Every year at the end of the year, we hold a reception with food and music, and we give an acknowledgement to our retirees. And we give them a clock that has CPS on it, an engraved clock. And because we did not have the face-to-face event, we did not give out the clocks. And one of our staff members in the employee engagement, employee experience department with Susan Bunty, drove around to 85 homes.
Wow.
To deliver those clocks. And she did that for people who were leaving the district. So you can see the commitment that we have. And so we will make sure that we get the information out to our kids, and we will do whatever it takes to deliver those materials. Each school is developing and setting the schedule for their orientation, but that orientation development plan has to be reviewed with their director, as well as our deputy superintendent has provided a orientation checklist of the things that need to be covered in the orientations, so that they are standard but also customized according to the schools. And Tiana, if you'd like to join in to speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Yes, we have been in communication with our principals, and our teachers return next week. So we have an educator's guide with all of the information that will be emailed to our teachers. Also, we're going to take advantage of our meal hubs. We have meal hubs at every site, open every Wednesday. So we will allow families to also pick up any instructional materials, any academic materials, art materials to help them at home. We have staff handbooks, student handbooks, and parent handbooks available as well. So we can distribute all of those resources at our meal hubs.
And if I can just add, please, is there any way to get this information out to your partners? Because partners have been in extensive relationship with the students in different ways over the summer even. So if partners are, I'm sure will, they have connections, they can get parents there, they can get materials to parents. But if there's some information they can get out to the partners about the day, the meal hubs, just a reminder, or maybe the days of the orientation to pick up, so that they can coordinate that with their families. They can get the families there or get the material for the families.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that Shauna Murphy follows up on that, because partners are under her as well as resource coordinators. So that's great. The other thing is to keep in mind that our schools will be open 5 days a week. So if a parent misses their specific time to drive through and meet their teachers, then they can come up to the school. But we're going to be making sure that we get those materials out by a certain time, because we don't want parents to come after Labor Day asking for their materials. School will have already started. So we'll be out there getting them out.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to give an order. Ms. Bolton, Mr. Lindy, Mr. Morosky, and Ms. Bates.
Thank you. One of the suggestions I've heard in the community is for one of these fantastic parent town halls to be done for our Spanish-speaking families. It's come to me 3 or 4 times from 4 or 5 different directions. I know that's really something incredibly difficult perhaps to do, but with all of the partners that we have and the people that care about it, I think they could really rev up an appropriate audience, and I think that would be very, very important. So I'd like you to be thinking about that. In the parent town halls, there was one sentence that needs to be everywhere, and it was a sentence spoken by Sarah Trimble Oliver in all 3 parent engagement town halls, and that was that we are living by every one of the CDC requirements, and that they're not requirements, but that we're living by it. Virtually you can't hear a thud or a sigh or something, but that is a message that is still not getting out there. And we are one of the few groups that is able to say that. So I really hope we find a way to message that. Is there any way that with this testing piece, since we have these wonderful school nurses at each of our 60 or so schools, is there some kind of certification they need to be able to to do the test? Probably not, but I mean, just as a thought, as a medical practitioner, I mean, as a person that did it at a pop-up center, I'm not altogether sure that everybody that was giving me my test was, had a, full medical whatever. I mean, that would be of value. And I don't mean to make light of it, but I think having a nurse at every building has been making an impression, at least on some of the folks that I've been hearing from. Does everybody understand the falsification of testing? Since we're now saying that you may or may not have full documentation, but that you have to, is it true that some of our employees can just testify that they have been tested? Or do they have to produce written?
Can we answer the first question? And that is, Susan, Can you speak to the health department, the nurses administering the test? And then Paul, if you could speak to the verification of the confirming the test.
That's why you're superintendent.
Thank you for your question. The nurses are actually in training this week, and they are being reinforced in all things COVID and about our policies and practices that we have in place. So they are doing that this week.
And they administer the test.
Yes.
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 That's great.
Mr.
And then as a
Mcdole?
follow-up, yes, as a follow-up to the second question, as Superintendent Mitchell mentioned earlier, there has been lag time in test results and different types of results coming back in. What we create is a form that our employee has to assign a testing to, taking the test that can be turned back in and then tracked into our system.
And if I could follow up, falsifying that would be the same or the equivalent of falsifying another document that would mean something bad would happen.
Absolutely.
Obviously. Last couple, I promise. Is there a way to communicate to our other 9 or 11 municipalities or townships our situation or where we are? I'm thinking of Amberley, I'm thinking of Cheviot, I'm thinking of Delhi. A lot of our outlying areas, I know we're in touch with the county people, but I think a personal effort to those 9 or 11 municipalities or townships as to where CPS is would not only help them with their residents, but also as other elected officials that could be of great importance for the other outlying areas. And finally, throughout the parent town halls, which I think were great, is it possible that we find a way to have that parent academy for tech and everything else be housed in one place? And I think you probably do, but not necessarily depend on each school to provide those sorts of insights. I mean, maybe that's another way to use digital or what have you, but the more I know about what's happening nationwide, the more I'm impressed with what you all and we all have been doing.
So I will say that there are some standard videos that we have created for parent orientations related to Schoology and our school, so that the parent's experience isn't different from building to building. The other thing that I will say, and Kristen, maybe we can consider inviting some of those townships to our the next community meeting, which will give some information on Friday. I will say that we've done a lot of engagement with a lot of different groups. Just the week before last, I did an engagement with the refugee population, where there were over 40 organizations represented there, and so they gave me an hour block of time there. And we are making our rounds at every possible venue, every radio show, Lincoln Ware, all of them. Nathan Ivy, the Woke. So, I mean, like, just all over the place. And so I will actually provide to you all a list of all the public engagement that we have been doing over the last several weeks.
Yeah.
That's great, but do consider the Spanish-speaking town hall if possible.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Mr. Lindy.
Thanks, President Jones. I have one thank you and two questions. I think my thank you for the superintendent. I think that the responses on the data questions were just great. They were very, very helpful. They were very, very clarifying. I think they answered everything I was looking for last time. I think specifically the idea that the downward trend is that 7-day moving average, and is it lower after 14 days than it was beforehand, I think is just very clear and very helpful. And it's good to know that we get the positivity rate only once a week. And I feel very clear on whether we're close or not and in what direction we're trending. And I just think that that's really very, very, very helpful. And I wanted to say thank you. I think that I had two questions. One was, and I think Superintendent, on both of these, if there's a better point later in the meeting to get into them, happy to defer. But I thought this might be the right time, so I'll just raise them. One was I really enjoyed Tiana's presentation last time and felt excited about what feel to me like 3 really clear must-wins for the first 2 weeks of school. The first one, that 95% of kids are accessing the content online. The second, that there's some real-time culture building. Like, I loved the morning meeting she had on the schedule. I thought was great. And that there are these regular one-on-one touch points with kids or families so that we can help knock down barriers to virtual learning as they're coming up. It was great to talk about that last time, and it was really great to hear that the team's plan is to collect data on how those things are going. I think all that sounds great. My one question was, do you have a sense of when we could look at some of that data together as a board to see how that's going? Obviously, we can't do that till school starts, but I was curious when would be a good time to look at that together.
Well, thank you, Board Member Lindy. We plan to collect data, benchmark, baseline data for the first 4 weeks of school. So I would say probably the last week of September, we'll be able to share that baseline.
That's helpful to hear. Tiana, I'm a little worried that if we wait 4 weeks to, well, let me say that differently. Are you all going to look at it more regular? Will the first time you and your team look at that be 4 weeks after school started?
No, we will look at that data daily because it's in Power School. But to report out to you, I think we need to collect a few data points and have that information to share out. We don't want to just do it unless you want it the first week to see where we stand.
I think it all. I think that the one really important thing is that you all have access to it faster than that. I think that's great. So you could literally, and I'm new to Power School, but the idea is like you all could know after a couple days what % of kids are logging on and what % of kids are accessing the content.
We see that daily.
That's great.
Yes.
That's great. That's great. I'm excited to hear about it when you want to talk about it with the board. I think my superintendent, yeah.
Yeah, can I just respond to that as well? And so what we're going to do is have one master big dashboard that will be the view that I have. Each PLT member will have a subset of that big dashboard that they're looking at on a weekly basis that's related to the areas of work that's under their purview. So, for example, Susan Bunty will be looking at engagement as it relates to social and emotional learning, as well as physical and mental health services. Tiana will be looking at the engagement in terms of kids getting into Schoology, their Google Meet sessions. And so we're going to have dashboards that will be separate dashboards that can be all combined, that I will have that view. And so it isn't just that we're going to go in and look at the information, like look into Power School every day. It's going to be pulled together in a dashboard, so it's in a meaningful way for us to be able to interpret the data and to be able to move very quickly. In addition to having operational huddles to see how are we doing operationally on our procedures, confirmed cases, suspected cases. We will also have instructional huddles around engagement and whether our students are logging in and how they're doing, and their grades uploaded within a certain amount of time. So there will be operational as well as instructional huddles, and we will be analyzing that data on a daily basis through a dashboard that we're going to create for each PLT member.
I think that sounds great, Superintendent. And just to be totally transparent about what's behind my question, like the assumption I have from the spring is that less than 95% of kids were logging on every day to do virtual learning. And the goal that I hope we can hit in the fall is that at least 95% of kids every day are accessing the online learning. And so that makes me think it's going to be a lot of work to get from where we were to where we want to be. But what I'm hearing from you all is you've got a plan. We're aligned on the same outcome. You got good data and reporting systems, and I think we should go get it. Was any of that not right?
I believe what you said is accurate. I will say that I think it's important to keep in mind that, not an excuse, but last winter and spring was a state of crisis. So on Thursday of 1 week, the governor announced that we were going to be closing and Monday was going to be the last day. So in a spirit of transparency, did we have an adequate, sufficient, robust distance learning plan? We did not. We have had a lot of time and a lot of months to work on this. And so 4 weeks into the close down in early April, we started our future schools work to start planning for the upcoming school year. And what we're saying to parents is that the experience you had last year will not be the experience moving forward.
I think that sounds great. And I know President Jones wants me to be quick, so this is my last one. It's related. It's about the connectivity. Last time it looked like there was a meaningful gap between the take-up rate we wanted from the summer pilots with the Cincinnati Bell project and where we wound up. Can you update us on, like, as of today, what % of kids in CPS do we know have access to internet and a device?
Hey, so if I can, I'll jump in there. I'd be happy to give an update. So if you recall last week, when we talked about the rollout of the connectivity piece for all of the schools, we were going to segment that slightly, like 10 schools per day. So some of that preliminary data is still being compiled that we really need for perspective. The quantifying piece, since we literally just finished on Friday with the last set of schools. What we do have, I think that paints a little bit better picture of what you're looking for is the raw counts on the service data, right? So what we talked about, the 7% from the pilot, was the number of students who had service activated out of the population we were targeting, about 30%. So over last week, anecdotally, I can tell you, we overran the call center, which was a good sign to start with. So the number of signups has increased. But what we have for a raw count on the actual service is we're increased to around 9.1% out of the 30 target, which we're also, as we continue to develop the data, we can revise the 30%. It is slowly dropping as we find out more students and families have internet access.
Thanks, Jeremy. I really appreciate that. So it sounds like there's been movement, but if we're at 9.1 and we want to be at 30, there's still a long way to go. Is that fair?
I would say that it is fair, but we definitely are trending significantly higher rates than what we were. So I think we're going to pick up speed, if that's fair to say.
Are there ways the board could be helpful for you all?
The number one thing I would recognize would just be continuing the messaging. Make sure that we're consistent that that the service is available, the offering is available, and that we need families that are not traditionally being seeing the information in traditional ways, get that message that they need to call and get their connectivity set up, as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have 3 more board members who want to speak. And I'm sorry, I have to apologize to my colleagues. It is my job to be the timekeeper, and this is all good stuff. I'm not trying to deny our public the transparency, but I do think it's important that we have to keep the meeting going. So please just keep that in mind. Okay, so moving on. James Michael Morosky, do you have something to say?
James Michael has a lot to say. He just can't say it all yet. And I will be brief. I know, Superintendent, the district has been very cognizant of childcare issues and things like that. And I was wondering, with asking the teachers to be in person, what considerations there had been, if any, regarding folks being able to bring kids into the school. If that had been discussed at all for parents, maybe who are going to be in the classroom teaching and have young kids. And I had one other question after that.
So I do have a response for you regarding that. It's a personnel issue. If I could address it at a later time this evening, but I have a response for you.
Okay. And then I think that is probably it from me then for now.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Day, go ahead, Superintendent.
I will say that we did do some benchmarking against other districts, and so I spoke with the superintendent, Dr. Lally, in Dayton, and their teachers will be on site, and they are not going to provide childcare on site due to liability issues. There's another smaller district in Virginia that they're going to allow it on their campus, and so there's a variety of things that people or school districts are doing to address this. But I do have some thoughts on this issue.
That's instructive for me. I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
In addition, the PA is going to come out very soon with a big announcement around their child care program.
Thank you. Ms. Bates?
Yes, I mean, the data is very detailed, and the superintendent has advisors, and it makes a lot of sense. But yesterday we saw the governor, if I can be so blunt to say, parade out 3 pediatric medical experts, one of which advises us, who's saying that, number one, they would send their kids to school. Number 2, they would put them on the buses. And number 3, 3 feet is sufficient if they're wearing masks. So how do we, reconcile? I mean, we even canceled our in-person small group orientations, yet we have, state experts belying what we're doing. So how do we reconcile that with our community?
Are you asking a question, or are you rhetorical?
That has a question mark at the end.
Oh,
I'm asking.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
You're breaking up, so.
Got it.
Thank you. I think that I would be very interested to see if the governor comes out and makes a hard stance in any direction. I think that the message that has been giving in conversations that I've been in with him is that he's, at this point, he's really leaving it up to local jurisdiction, and it's very contextual in terms of the community. And so I think that each community just has to look at the data for their area and then to make decisions that they feel are in the best interest of their families and their kids.
Okay. Thank you. So I do have one closing comment, which, and quite a few of my questions have been answered, but I just wanted to say, and this is in support of Mr. Messer's idea about communication and messaging. And I just wanted to comment, Superintendent, that, and we talked about this before, about the importance of the district being in front of the messaging. Because I think what I've found in all of this, as you've gone out and done town halls and the radio shows or whatever, is that our community really appreciates seeing you out in front and having the opportunity to talk to you directly. And, we're all on, people are on Facebook, social media, and we're in contact with our constituent groups. But there's nothing better, in my opinion, than our superintendent being in front of the message in a very formal way through direction and guidance from the board. So a lot of the comments that I have been getting is, We need to see more of her. Now, I know your time is limited, but I think for future reference, just keeping those in mind, that is so critical to our communities, especially our communities of color. I need to say that, especially our communities of color. So, and so that's all I have to say. And if it's okay, we can go on to move on to the next presentation, Superintendent.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to introduce Assistant Superintendent Susan Bunty. And, you know, in order to make all of this work happen, we have to have employee engagement and have a positive employee experience. And so that is the crux of Susan's work, in addition to positive school culture and students with disabilities and ELL and gifted. But we do really recognize how important our employees are in the engagement. So Susan.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. I am deeply appreciative of the opportunity to be here. So if we think about why this work is so important, we recognize that without supporting our employees, that our students won't be supported in the best way possible. So by supporting folks who are within our schools, it helps all. We're going to talk about three main messages tonight. First is that employee engagement is absolutely critical always, but no more so than during this time period. And that it's important also for folks to realize that the strategy is built upon not only data that we've gathered internally, but also upon national trends. We've looked at it in three main focus areas that are connected to care, how we provide clarity for our employees around responsibilities and role, and around creating opportunities to be heard. On the next slide, we are going to take a look at some national data. So again, this data isn't specific to Cincinnati Public Schools, but it mirrors probably what our employees might say. This was done by Gallup, and you can see the differences between the middle of May and the middle of June, and what a significant change there was. So what we know from national trends is that employees are seeking clear plans of action, making sure that they have adequate resources to be able to enact those plans. They want to have information in real time and to also know that their employer really cares about their well-being. Next slide, please. So we had the national look, but we've also taken a look at what our Cincinnati Public School employees are saying that they would like to see. So based on data from the May Gallup administration, from our June Thought Exchange and our May Future of Schools survey, the data broke out into three main categories of need. One is that our employees want to be cared for and cared about. And so thus the prioritization of health and safety that we've spent so much time on over these last months, but also to be able to have trauma-informed support for themselves and for them to be able to better serve students. They want that clear line of sight, that focus. So what is the clarity around priorities and responsibilities? And where are we moving as an organization? And finally, folks want to be heard. The town halls, arenas like that where people can express their opinions and then be able to see what action are taken as a result. Next slide, please. So if we take the employee needs and then think about how those translate into strategies on our next slide, we know that if we really focus on that first area about caring, that it's incumbent upon us as a district to create opportunities for adults to connect, to heal from some of the things that have happened over these last few months, and to build their capacity to support students. We also know that our employees want to be heard. So how can we create opportunities for not only listening, but also for responding? And finally, how do we help employees? The third strategy is around clarification. to, and specifically around supporting our leaders to be able to implement and model trauma-informed practices. Next slide, please. So in that first arena of how we care for our employees, we do that in four different ways. One is asynchronous opportunities. So we are providing support for teachers affected by trauma self-paced training modules this year. There is also a CPS self-care app, and we have mindfulness tools that have been made available or will be made available to all employees. Synchronous opportunities also are available. So Beach Acres provided a self-care and resiliency course during our spring closure. It was incredibly popular, and so that will be offered again, in addition to self-care workshops and a new teacher induction session that Paul will talk more about in a little bit around caring for self and others. We also know peer connections are important, so lunch and learns and new groups that have been established on LinkedIn, and MindPeace is partnering with us again to provide support groups for our employees that will launch in August 24th. And finally, traditional types of things that have existed in the past, including our employee assistance program, our weekly support emails that have lots of tools and resources in them, and then the employee COVID guide around. Next slide, please. So in our second area of Hear Me, we know that we need to create times to listen. And so if we really think through not only the listening, but then based on that listening, how do we assess employee need? We gather all those trends and themes, and then how do we share those out with other leaders in the organization so that those pieces that people shared with us can become actionable. And then that becomes communicated back to them so they know not only did we hear, but we acted upon concern. Next slide, please. And finally, in our third area, we know that leaders play an important role of supporting their folks. And so if we look at that in three main areas of training, resources, and support, we are today started with our directors talking about how we lead during difficult times and provided tools and strategies on how to be able to do that. You also can see some of the other areas. There will be support provided around peer coaching and around mentoring, and a leadership bulletin specifically aligned to our functional leaders, our leader of leaders, leaders of others, and individual leaders. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to transition to our Director of Human Resources, Paul Mcdole, who's going to share with you the very exciting pieces involving our newest teachers.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, board members, and good evening to our public who's on this call with us tonight. Very glad to be here to kind of continue the story that Susan's been telling. And if this slide could say anything, I think it would be saying to us, wow, how do things change so quickly in 1 year? You can see to one side our new hire induction for our teachers from 2019 to 20. And then we can then see from the 2021 new hire induction and how things drastically have changed in that year period of time. Next slide, please. But as our superintendent and our leadership team has said, we have to be agile and when we have to adjust. That's exactly what we did. So we were able to hold our new hire induction via Google Meet on August 5th, 6th, and 7th, 8:30 to 3:30. We had over 150 new hire teachers participate daily, and we had in different areas, general ed teachers, pre-K to 12, counselors, school psychologists, and intervention specialists. Next slide, please. Again, knowing this was held remotely, we felt it very, very important that we collaborate amongst the various departments within the organization to make sure that we were sharing information that was useful from so many different aspects. So you can see some of the teams that were involved from human resources, talent management team, peer assistance and review, partnership with Cincinnati Federation of Teacher, environmental health and safety, critically important that we had the opportunity to share with our new teaching staff the procedures that we have put in place for the safety of our staff and our students. Also, the Department of Student Services, curriculum and instruction, positive school culture team, and also ITM, and then also our communications department. Next slide, please. So as we think through what a day of virtual welcoming to our new hire staff would look like, obviously we had a welcome from both our superintendent, Laura Mitchell, and from our board president, Carolyn Jones. We shared information that is very pertinent to our employees, including payroll and benefits information, safety protocols for COVID-19, talent management and launch ed, the opportunity that our staff will have professional development in those different areas, positive behavior interventions and support, professional learning focus, building relationships in a virtual environment, critically important to us at this point in time, blended and personalized learning differential and mastery, increased student interaction engagement, again, another critical piece that our teachers will be faced with. And lastly, and most importantly, socially media do and don't. We spent some time sharing with our employees what is the proper communication as a staff and what would be improper communication. So again, very happy to share with you, last slide please, a very successful 3 days of virtual overview for our new hire teachers that will be the newest teachers coming into our building. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information, and any questions that Susan and I can ask, we would be glad to.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have a couple of questions. Ms. Bowers first, Mr. Messer, followed by Ms. Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Assistant Superintendent Bunty and Mr. Mcdole. I just want to comment on how I'm excited about all of this social-emotional support, and especially the synchronous opportunities for teachers to have conversations around self-care, the mind piece, collaboration about peer support, but most importantly, the learning and responding. Being able to close that circle is so important foundation for our staff, especially with this transition and where we are right now. I mean, it's important all along, but I think that that's key in building that trust. Paul, and I just want to say that I thought that was a nice orientation presentation. I went to a couple of orientations last year in person that was at Aiken. I won't say it was in August of last year, but I think this one was a lot more in detail than even the in-person one that I attended. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. It was definitely a team effort, but thank you. The team appreciates that.
Good.
Thank you. Mr. Messer?
Yeah. So I don't think I have to restate how much I love the work that we're doing on employee engagement. And I will just continue to push us to make sure that we're getting that to the level where we are measuring that by building and really looking at where engagement can be a focus to make sure that we are creating the best work environment where people can do what they do best at all the 12 questions. And, I think that would be one thing kind of in this bucket that I would love to see kind of as an update of when we think we're going to be able to get to the buildings. And then, again, I'll just reiterate my colleague who talked about the social emotional piece. I had been reached out to by the director of UC Center of Integrative Health and Wellness, Sean Cotton, who happens to be a CPS mother, but she's very interested in engaging with us, with our staff. And I would say kind of what she had tossed around as ideas is what I'm seeing in my workplace, that there's work and then there's work during a pandemic. And then I think, she said, and I totally agree, what our staff, and it's not just the teachers, I think it's our paras and everybody else, and I'm looking at our superintendent, our assistants, all of them are working around the clock try and all this entire staff and whatever we can do to invest in their health during these times. A very customized approach is going to pay huge dividends in our employee engagement, making people be able to thrive, but that will transition to even more success with our students and the family and everything else. So I challenge us to make sure that we're moving heaven and earth to do really specific, all the stuff around mindfulness, meditation, personal care, everything that's kind of in that bucket of integrative medicine that they're doing specific to pandemic workplaces, I think is well worth our time.
So I just want to comment that we are moving Gallup into 20 schools this fall, and we will be launching in September the Q12 for not only our central office employees, but our 20 schools as well. And we have been in conversation with Sean, so Sarah Brody, our talent development director, is with the whole new team. Yes.
Just
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Bolton?
Yeah, I'm going to be careful how I say some of this because it doesn't sound like happy talk. We cannot be in this particular century with previously designed contracts, previously designed processes, previously designed policies. That COVID has actually taught us a lot of lessons. I know in Finance Committee, we're looking at lessons learned and how do you change processes. The idea that we can do this remotely and have 2,000 people participate in some way, shape, or form instead of 13 of the same darn people. We have to embrace these new opportunities that the new world is presenting us. And nothing is more important than the fact that some months ago now, Superintendent introduced us to paying folks 438 people, staff people, for 15 hours of work to figure out how to do whatever we decided, make it happen at each school site. That's the democratization that is helpful and good and specific. And I just want us, just like with, as a couple of members mentioned about the Digital Academy and seizing this moment, there are positive opportunities and new ways of doing business that we can seize. And I'm thrilled with our investment in our employees. I'm thrilled with the engagement, but I don't want to engage them to figure out how the old world worked. It's how to engage them in the new world. Because we are in a new world and everybody that's living in the previous one is going to be left behind. It's as simple as that. And I'm an old person, I get to say that. But get with it, embrace it, get on the train because it's leaving the station.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are not any more comments, we'll just close out and say these were two great presentations and lots of good dialogue and lots of good information shared with our public, and we're very appreciative of that. So moving on, we are now at the item on our agenda for hearing the public. Mr. Morosky, did you have a question? Okay.
No, I thought we were doing kudos. I'm good.
No, we're doing kudos after this. Work with me. We are now at the item on our agenda for hearing the public. Consistent with the state's direction to minimize public gatherings, we are convening this video conference call to include opportunity for public comment. Here are the specific instructions for participation in hearing of the public. To speak during hearing of the public, your request must have been received during the first 10 minutes of the meeting by clicking on the hand icon on your screen. Treasurer Wagner will be the timekeeper and will make every effort to call each speaker in the order received. Once the request has been granted by Treasurer Wagner, you will receive a notice on your screen. Please click yes to go interactive. If you do not want your video active, please disable the video camera icon. After speaking, you will briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream meeting. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. When the buzzer goes off, your 2 minutes are up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. We ask that your public commentary be respectful of all those listening in. Okay, Treasurer Wagner.
Actually, I was just going to say, Dan's going to be doing it tonight too, so that if I ever have to be absent, at least somebody else knows how to do it. So
Okay, great.
So, Board President, we have 12 speakers this evening. The first speaker is Sonia Lackey, and Christine Flaherty, and Sean Kelly. Go ahead, Ms. Lackey.
Thank you. As you said, my name is Sonia Lackey, and I am a teacher at Midway Elementary, and I am a proud teacher of CPS. With that being said, I feel that I'm honestly speaking for a lot of teachers when I say that, unfortunately, the town halls weren't exactly what people were expecting. We left there with more questions, more than we got answers. The presentation basically seemed to be the same presentation that has been made to the board the last several meetings. And as far as listening to us, less than a dozen people were actually allowed to speak. And so we were basically told to write things in the chat box and that, answers are forthcoming. I personally it's ironic that I'm following social emotional. Not that anybody wants to know my business, but I'm going to put it out there. I suffer from depression and anxiety, and it's taken me years to learn, and I'm still learning how to manage my emotions. But for people like myself, not having these answers really, really, really is tearing us apart. We truthfully don't feel that we've been heard. And the question that we are still waiting for an answer is, are we going to be teaching remotely from our house, or are we going to be going into the classroom? And I really, again, want to stress that with social emotional, the first part of the definition is the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions. It's hard to manage your emotions when you can't get answers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, Board President Jones, we have Christine Flaherty, followed by Sean Kelly. Go ahead, Christine. You're unmuted,
Hello,
Ms.
can you
Flaherty.
guys hear me? Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Wonderful. CPS administration, teachers, and staff, I'm a full-time working mother of 3 children, 2 of which are CPS students, and I feel that CPS has completely abandoned me and my family during this unprecedented time of need. I understand and appreciate that you've prioritized the physical well-being and safety. However, I believe you've completely overlooked emotional, mental, and financial health of your students and student families. Upwards of 70% of millennial women work outside the home. And as a result, the vast majority of your student families are wrestling with the real pressure of sorting through childcare options that enable their children to maintain an education in a virtual environment, while simultaneously enabling families to work in order to maintain livelihood. The uncertainty associated with childcare is creating enormous job pressures as families attempt to negotiate novel schedules with their employers, financial pressures as some families are compelled to cut back on work hours or take on unexpected childcare expenses, and marital pressures as spouses and partners negotiate unprecedented and unexpected levels of responsibilities with fewer resources than ever before. The true reality is that most of the families will have no choice but to find outside of the home childcare options to facilitate their ability to maintain employment. Options could include creating a neighborhood pod for learning environments, joining forces with other families, enrolling relatives, or turning to organizations that are offering new childcare solutions. With pod solutions, children are entering multiple homes per week that have uncertain and varied sanitization standards, not the standardized cleaning protocols and professional grade products that schools could provide. With grandparents, we're enrolling the highest risk populations to take care of our children. And with professional childcare solutions, they're simply outside of the financial grasp for most families. For perspective, among the childcare options I've identified and researched, which include the nanny, the Cincinnati Sports Club, Jewish Community Center, and daycare, the average monthly cost ranges from $2,300 to $3,800 for my 2 children. That's 50 to 80% of the median monthly household income for residents of Hamilton County. Clearly, these solutions are not reality.
Ms. Flaherty?
Yes, ma'am.
Your 2 minutes are up. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Sean Kelly, followed by Levon Slayer. Go ahead, Sean. You're unmuted. Go ahead, Sean. Okay, we'll come back to Sean. Our next speaker is Levon Slayer.
Actually, it's Levon Seiler, but that's okay. No big deal. You can hear me, Dan?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Cool. Hey, so, I appreciate everything y'all have done. I really appreciate especially the superintendent talking about all the outreach that she's been doing. I really respect your time and energy there. And I kind of want to follow up with what Ms. Bowers was saying about device distribution, but I already had my question written before I got on here, so I'll just read that. So what the question I have is, will CPS be relying primarily on resource coordinators who are non-CPS staff to handle community collaboration regarding food and supply support for kids as well as devices? Doing so in the spring got some mixed results despite the goodwill and best efforts of the resource coordinators. And will CPS prioritize community collaboration by having CPS staff, both salaried and hourly, CFT, AFSCME personnel, working to maximize the community-based collaboration and make sure all students are being reached and supported? And in addition to that, I just want to point out that obviously we know that there are some hard-to-reach communities, and part of those hard-to-reach communities, as I believe it was Ms. Bolton was referring to, was asking for a Spanish language town hall, and I think that would actually be very vital. It's going to be really difficult to reach a lot of immigrant communities because we've seen crackdowns from ICE actually occur at schools. So working with community groups, I think is important, and having volunteers help with device distribution, but I think that it makes the most sense for liability concerns and just to expedite that process that it should be CPS employees that do that, whether that be teachers volunteering to do that, or more importantly, like actual food service workers, people that are within the unions that do that. That's all I got to say. Thank you so much for your time, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jessica, followed by Mike. Go ahead, Jessica.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you all for your hard work during this unprecedented time. I am very concerned with the recent decisions to push our kids to 100% virtual interaction. Many of our neighboring districts and states are returning to in-person instruction this fall. Our CPS kids will fall farther and farther behind the longer we keep them out of our schools. In a district where many who have the option are already choosing private schools over CPS. I agree that the health and safety of staff and students need to remain at the forefront. But you have already acknowledged that there is a safe way to have face-to-face interaction in your endorsement of CRC, YMCA, and other childcare options mentioned during the town halls this week. You've praised these organizations for implementing safe protocols, yet you will not allow students to return to their own schools in smaller groups than they'll be in at these other childcare providers. There's been zero justification or explanation for this double standard. I understand that plans need to be set in advance, so at this point, the decision to go virtual until the end of September is set. Let's move forward together with these 5 weeks. Let's make them great. But we need our teachers. We need them doing what they do best, which is teaching in the classroom. Our CPS teachers are essential employees. I urge you to evaluate your mindset in early September when you plan for the remainder of the school year. I believe that the emotional well-being and academic success of our kids and the future of CPS depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Mike, followed by Lauren. Go ahead, Mike.
Hello, thank you very much. Everybody can hear me, I assume?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody on this call, all board members, all the work you're doing in these crazy, difficult times. We certainly appreciate it. I'm the parent of a soon-to-be 5th and 2nd grader at High Park School. I'm also a very active parent volunteer, the athletic director for 3 years, and have coached across multiple teams, multiple divisions, multiple sports. I say that only to illustrate that I feel that I'm well connected with the parent population, at least specifically within the High Park area. And today, I think a lot of people are upset about the reversal of the decision to have an on-site and in-person orientation. The fact of the matter is that we're already dealing with so much. These kids have so much thrust upon them that it's insane. And as crazy as it may sound, that orientation, that on-site and in-person orientation, that opportunity to see a teacher for a second and maybe a classroom or a former friend passing down the hall, that provided hope. As small as it may be, it was hope. And that hope is a very powerful thing. And today that got ripped away from the vast majority of people. Now, I think people that I talk to in my network are upset for 2 different reasons. Number one, we feel that there's a lot of people who want to go back to school, right? They want to play sports. They want to meet their teacher. And we've lost control. We don't have the opportunity to have a say in that. Still coming to grips with the fact that we don't have a say. And through all of that, regardless of our ability to say, the emotional and social impact is going to be far more damaging than anything else that we're going to have to deal with. And the second reason that people are upset is that the reasoning we're being given for a lot of these decisions is about feedback and people speaking up and coming forward. In fact, today's decision about the orientation was quoted to say, a great deal of feedback. That's not my experience. My experience in my social network has been the complete opposite. And regardless, even if there was feedback to the contrary, to say we don't want on-site orientation, what does it matter for those people? If we're not going to be going back to school on-site for a month or longer, those people who are providing that feedback don't have to attend an on-site orientation. I think the people...
Thank you. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. Your 2 minutes are up. I apologize.
Okay, our next speaker is Lauren, followed by Ashley. Go ahead, Lauren.
Okay. Hello. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm very upset.
You're unmuted now, Lauren, so go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm very upset and frustrated that the orientations have been changed to completely virtual. I have a kindergartner and a 2nd grader, and especially for these young kids, not being able to meet their teacher in person is causing them to miss out on forming a connection with their teacher at the beginning of the year. So this is going to make virtual learning even harder. My kids and I can certainly learn the technology piece of the orientation virtually, but please allow them to meet their teacher in person. What I heard on this call was that my kids can wave to their teacher from the car when we pick up supplies. What I want to know is why can't the supply pickup be set up like the device pickup, where we are outside of the car, we stand in line, kids can wait their turn, and then they get a short 5-minute meet and greet with their teacher. I feel like I'm willing to compromise on the orientation piece with the technology, but please allow them to have a few moments to meet their teacher. Obviously, the scenario was deemed safe by CPS for the device pickup, so I wonder why this can't be an option for the supply pickup where they can also meet their teacher. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Ashley, followed by Sean. Go ahead, Ashley. You're unmute. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Hi, I'm a parent of a 6th grader and a 4th grader, 2 very upset students that won't be able to go to school this year. It's very sad. We very much hope that after September 28th, we'll be able to go as planned. Right now, I would like to talk about the orientation being canceled. You say that it was based on feedback. However, there was never any ask to provide feedback. I feel that if you did ask to provide feedback, you would probably hear the actual amount of positivity towards this. Just you pointed out in your email the importance of starting school off strong. I read that, I had to reread it. I thought that I was dreaming. At this point, even a tiny piece of school is really like a dream come true for the kids. This is so important for them to start this year off strong. It's going to be so hard for them. Everything that they've known and loved about school is being taken away. At least give them this time to meet their teachers, see their classroom, see their school, know that it's still there. School is waiting for you. Your teachers are here. They'll be here waiting for you. Your classmates are here. Everything's going to be okay. We're all going to do this together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you for the time. In the mode of hope for the best, but plan for the worst, I just want to encourage the board, the administration, and everyone involved to make sure that throughout the first semester, normally there would be thousands of Cincinnati public students taking the PSAT, the SAT, the ACT, and other tests that have a huge impact on their future. I just want to make sure that they have the ability, regardless of whether school is in person or not, to still take those tests this fall. It's very important to their futures, and I think if the board and the administration empowers, supports the counselors, the principals, the test coordinators to be creative, to think outside of what would normally be acceptable, to make sure that our students have that opportunity. Parents have been, a lot of constants have been taken away, which no fault of any of yours, obviously, throughout our country. But I think one thing is if students could count on knowing that those tests that are so important to them could still happen in a safe way, but we have a lot of property in CPS. We could do it. For the juniors and seniors who are in high school, I just want you to be creative and think through that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a few more speakers. Next will be Helena, followed by AC. I also wanted to remind, we have two speakers who need to accept the invitation to interact live. That's Lauren Sample and Emily Robertson. If you could accept that invitation, we will get you on the board to speak to. But next is Helena. Go ahead, Helena.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I spoke at the last board meeting and I thanked Superintendent Mitchell for going virtual. I'm a teacher, a high school teacher, and I thanked her for going virtual since I am high risk and pregnant. And I got very upset this morning when I opened my email and realized that we are still requested to show up to work for at least the first 2 weeks of school. I frankly don't understand this one bit, since all of the PD that we have the first week is virtual, and since students will be participating in orientations the following week along with their parents that are also virtual. I don't understand why I am required to be in the school building alone in my classroom, breathing in the same air that's being breathed in and coughed into by all of the other teachers in the building, when I could work from my house just as all of you are right now. I happen to have a private home office at my house. I have a whiteboard, a chalkboard. I have everything I need to teach. And because of that, I think that we should be at least given the option of working from home or going into school. Teachers who would like to teach from school should have the ability to do that. But we shouldn't be forced, especially those of us who are high risk. I frankly don't feel like I'm being protected by my school. I don't feel like I'm being cared for by my employer, and I don't feel like I'm being heard since my emails are being largely unanswered. And I just wanted to say that, as I know many teachers feel exactly the same way as I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is AC, followed by Emily. Go ahead, AC.
Hi. I first wanted to say that I appreciate your hard work in dealing with this challenging situation, and I do appreciate you choosing to go remote until it is safe to be in buildings. I wanted to echo what Helena just said. CBS News just reported that COVID can spread through the air up to 16 feet, and civil and environmental engineering professor at Virginia Tech who studies how viruses travel through the air says that this is new information is considered to be the smoking gun everyone has been asking for. And so I think we need to prioritize ventilation in our buildings at this point. I'm not sure if we have gotten new filters. I haven't received any information about that, but I know that at my son's daycare, they added hospital grade HEPA filters, and that gave me comfort. I hope we can do the same in our buildings. And I would like to get air quality reports for our buildings. I think that should be public information. And as far as going back to school the next couple of weeks, I'm fearful about doing that as well. I don't mind going in, for a few hours or whatnot every once in a while when needed, but I am really concerned about having to share the same restroom with others. I think that's where we get into some really sticky situations. Being by myself in my classroom all day is fine, but I'm worried about the common spaces like the restroom. And I hope that we can address this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Emily Robertson. Go ahead, Ms. Robertson.
Hi, I'm a CPS math teacher as well as the parent of 2 young CPS students. Like many parents, I have a working spouse. Mine is a firefighter and paramedic working on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. Starting next week, it is my understanding that CPS teachers are required to report to their buildings for 2 weeks of professional development and orientations, even though it will be provided digitally. At the same time, in-person orientations have been canceled for students and parents due to safety concerns. The school board has opted for remote meetings, and at least so far, CPS hasn't shared any childcare options for CPS staff. I hope that you will consider accommodating the safety concerns and childcare needs of staff by making the upcoming 2 weeks of professional development and orientations remote. Thank you very much for providing this platform for comments and for all of your hard work preparing for this unprecedented return to school.
Thank you.
Board President, our last speaker is CFT President Julie Sellers, but Julie, you need to accept the invitation to interact live. I don't think Julie's accepted the invitation. That is all of our speakers.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we are going to move on at this point. And so the long-awaited kudos. So does anyone have any kudos? Mr. Lindy, followed by Mr. Morocci.
Thank you, President Jones. I had just a really wonderful conversation with CPS employee Dave Traubert last week, who leads the social studies curriculum department. And I was connected with him through our very nice system for logging community questions. And so I wanted to thank the board office staff for maintaining that document. It's very helpful. And the reason I wanted to offer a kudos to Dave was just he's really worked hard to make sure the social studies materials that are available to staff really do engage kids in what's been happening around the country this summer with regards to protests for racial justice. In particular, he's designed some units that help teach basic social studies skills to kids in the first unit of the year. I remember teaching units like that when I was a social studies teacher. But the choice of topics really do focus on social justice and also the life and impact of the recently deceased John Lewis. So I just thought this was great and was one example of the ways in which I think CPS can encourage teachers and educators to lead with their kids in this moment of history that we're in. And I wanted to say thank you.
Okay, gotcha. Mr. Morosky?
This is a really cool kudos. I don't know how many of you are aware that we have a CPS employee, a teacher at SCPA, who is also an ultra runner. His name is Harvey Lewis. He runs to school every day, he runs home every day, and ultra running, I have discovered, is crazy long distances. And Harvey Lewis, CPS teacher Harvey Lewis, just beat the Badwater record, which is a 146-mile race from the lowest point in Death Valley all the way to the highest point. He beat it by almost 30 minutes, which is like days. It took him 33 hours to do the race, and the record has been held for like 29-ish years. I think this is worth fine. Yeah, it was held for 29 years. And in addition to that, it took Harvey 33 hours, 39 minutes. And he also raised money for City Gospel Mission while he did it, and his goal was $2,500. And the last I saw Harvey put on Facebook, he was up to $9,000. So I think that's worthy of an enormous kudos, 146-mile race, and set the national record. And he's one of our teachers at SCPA. So kudos to Mr. Lewis and all the folks that I know helped him get there. He's always really adamant about saying it's not just him. So kudos.
Thank you. I do have one. Does anybody else have one? Have any? Go ahead, Ms. Bolton.
Yes, I certainly don't want to be outdone by Mr. Lindy regarding celebrating the social studies curriculum director, Mr. Robert, but so I will contribute this as well. He has also been extremely involved with the development of CPS Outside, which is that growing network of folks that will be presented to us some weeks ago, and also will be, I think, a part of the future of the efforts that we will be making virtually and in class outside, joining all the networks of green folks and environmental education and adventure crew, the whole group. So he has really been representing the new CPS. As part of that, I want to send kudos, and I appreciate Mr. Morosky and former member Mr. Davis. I want to send kudos to Emily Campbell of the curriculum department. Curriculum is the secret weapon, and it is great that we are doing these sorts of things that allow our children to be competitive with the other school districts' kids that are getting the kind of curriculum background. And of course, in this pandemic experience, it's been in a crisis mode, but congrats to our curriculum people, because they've been working as hard as anybody else. So, but hats off.
Thank you. And then I'll close out with my kudo. We talk about how important student voice is. And more frequently, we hear from our older students. But I happened to attend and listen in on 2 of the town hall meetings, and there was one student, a 10-year-old, who called in And her basic message was, I want to come back to school.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't get involved in the politics. She didn't get involved in the civil liberties versus civic duty. She didn't get into that. She wants to come back to school. But
Right.
let me tell you why I'm going to give her kudos, and I don't know her name, but I'm going to give her kudos because she was the most respectful person talking to people who are 3 and 4 and 5 times her age. And she expressed herself well, and I would just want to say it was a job well done for her. And then she hung up and said, I have to hang up because my phone is about to die. So if that isn't typical kid where they probably use all their battery life. But anyway, I say kudos to that student. We're proud of you.
And President Jones, just to interject, she had excellent manners. You talked about her manners were excellent.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you. All right. So we're going to move on. Ms. Bates, are you prepared to do the retirements or?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Have several retirements to commend, or teachers and staff to commend on their retirement. And 3 are teachers: Jocelyn E. McOsker, Lisa R. Kelly Girton, Mary E. Strohmeyer Wentz, and our civil service staff person, Teresa Nelson Hill, who is a paraprofessional. So we thank these professionals for their service to our children and wish them well.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Okay, so moving on, this evening's Board Matters presentation is really an update. Ms. Bolton, this is the Property Tax Work Group, and you all should have received your handouts for that.
Yes, thank you, President Jones. It should not take too much time, but as many of you know, for the last year and a half, Vice Mayor Smitherman and also co-chair Carol Gibbs have been convening a group of stakeholders of a noticed public committee to look into some of these issues regarding property tax and how property taxes going up too much has indeed destabilized some neighborhoods. And I think you've all had an opportunity to read the several pages of the report. You know, I've been reporting periodically to the board, and then also we've now have finished motions that have now been presented to the City Council Economic Development and Zoning Committee, and they will be worked on in September. I was so thrilled to represent the board, largely because I was at that time chair of finance and also have been very involved with a number of levy campaigns and what have you. So I was pleased to be invited. And throughout that, I represented our need to maintain at least our current, if not better, and improved and greater amount of revenue gained from property taxes and our fair share, as we used to say in the FCC negotiations and also in our most recent negotiations with the city. The committee paralleled a timeline, those 2 different negotiations. I was very gratified over time to see that the many, many stakeholders that are listed on the motions were very supportive and often defended CPS in a more articulate way than I did about our need for the revenue not to decrease. Our treasurer, as you know, presented kind of a 101 issue, and not only about school financing, but more particularly about our need for revenue and how we were being squeezed on every level regarding revenue. And I want to say, thankfully, those stakeholders from various different experiences and organizations actually paid fair trade, if you will, to CPS. And I thought that was a testament to the leadership of the superintendent and our efforts. The one area where, as I mentioned last time we met, where I kind of deviated from trying to protect the revenue piece was an interesting initiative presented by the committee, particularly led by the co-chairs, was the possibility that for the many, many hundreds and probably thousands of 4 families that exist throughout our district, that there was an interest in finding a way that even if it meant, and our great treasurer is looking into and doesn't necessarily have the dollars right now or the numbers right now, but we'll be able to present that to City Council and to the board what this might mean. There was an initiative to say, let's figure out how to find a way to have developers, small and large, but mostly smaller developers, help us redevelop our 4 families around this city of Cincinnati. As you know, west side to east side, you can't go on very many streets and not see a tremendous number of 4 families, many of which are in disarray, many of which are empty. And the co-chairs kind of reaching out to me and in the committee itself, and also beating back a little bit of the bigger developers wanting to take it to 8 or 10 or larger number of families, maybe 8 family, 16 family units. I can't describe it any other way, but I kind of succumbed, if you will, knowing what I know, especially about the west side. It made sense to me, especially in our housing conditions in the city and also our interest in the increase in enrollment during our growth plan, that it might not make bad sense, it might make good sense for the board to have a discussion about whether or not, even if this means or could mean a reduction in revenue, to at least not oppose the initiative of the development of 4 families in our town, both for our families, our new enrollment, our smaller developers that are probably our CPS families, folks and entrepreneurs as well. So I presented a number of pages as well as the motion. The motions have been presented to the Economic Development and Zoning Committee with the leadership of the vice mayor. There's also been some court action filed, not as a result of these motions, but trying to address some of the other issues regarding development and real estate, neighborhood by neighborhood. But I thought it would be good to kind of fess up that in this way, in this particular issue, I kind of went out on a limb. I'm happy to be there by myself, but I know that the board needs to discuss it, and it's possible by September, October, or thereabouts, we might be asked about how we actually feel about me voting kind of in favor of that new initiative. So somewhere along the line, tonight, tomorrow, or whenever, we might need to have a discussion about it, but it made sense after 18 months. And I know that the vice mayor has been very helpful in us with the negotiations with the city. But as a native West Sider, these 4 families that are not being developed, I think do present a great challenge and great opportunity. So I'd love board discussion about it, and whether or not the board might take a position on it is what this is about today.
Okay. I see Mr. Morosky first, followed by Ms. Bowers.
So Ms. Bolton, as somebody who cut his teeth on community work, doing affordable housing work for 13 years, and over the Rhine as it got gentrified, and knowing full well the lack of housing stock we have, I fully support what you did, and I'll go out on that limb with you as well. I would probably even get a little more radical with it, but I'll stop there. I don't know. I don't know that we need to be out there waving a banner or anything like that. But I mean, to your point, for whatever it's worth, and for the edification of my colleagues, I wouldn't fight it, and I think it makes sense. And I also think you taking it a couple levels deeper I would go out on that limb too and say I think is probably accurate, i.e., smaller entrepreneurs being our families. looking at our growth, and we're not going to be able to grow if we don't have places for people to live. So that would be my 2 cents. I appreciate the update and all your work on that committee. It's an important committee for us to be represented on.
Okay. Ms. Bowers, followed by Mr. Messer.
Yes, Board Member Bolton, being a novice in this area that you're speaking about, can you explain what you just said about and Mike, you already have worked in this area, but explain the benefit of what you're recommending in like a layman's term.
Yeah, I can say that first the committee was convened in part to protect the fact that a number of our citizens in a number of our neighborhoods are literally being forced out because of the cost of their property taxes, first and foremost, particularly our long-term residents and owners that are elderly, and also those people living with particular disabilities on fixed incomes. And so that was sort of the genesis, if you will, of this initial committee effort. And there are two subcommittees that dealt in those two areas. The area that I was put on of the subcommittee, not necessarily willingly, but was the whole idea of the TIFs and the initiatives regarding incentives for developers to make more money through those incentives. What this came down to was that the large developers are large enough to destabilize neighborhoods as gentrification, and Mike knows more about this, and so does Ryan. A number of you know a lot more about this than me. And so that was the focus. And one of the many, many answers was, first and foremost, it shouldn't always be large developers that are able to get the benefits of incentives. That it is time to find ways for other projects, smaller in nature, that could be for our smaller entrepreneurs. And one of the target areas for housing in Cincinnati is to bring families back. It's no longer just trying to bring our new young professionals, which was sort of the initial target, very frankly, for good reason. But now it is to try to bring families back. And families mean, if you look at the existing housing stock, which is phenomenal. This city has great housing stock. It's a very diverse housing stock. Great opportunities. One of the target areas that I think is the interest of the vice mayor, particularly, is the four-family, because there are hundreds and thousands of them, I believe. And in fairness to our treasurer, she's doing great research on this to figure out what the cost might be. But this is a way to incentivize development of the four families that are now vacant or underdeveloped, that we can benefit the smaller entrepreneurs, bring families back east to west in this town. I mean, when I sat there on the long line at New Prospect to get the COVID test, I counted, I think it was 17 four families just on one street.
On Sunday, I was there that day. Yeah,
we should have gone together.
Okay, all right. So okay.
So that's it.
Okay, thank you for connecting the dots.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Mr. Messer? We can't hear you.
Uh-oh. Air traffic control.
You're on mute, Ryan.
You
can't. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I had a couple visitors in my office. I had to mute myself. I think this would be a great way to engage our audit committee. As just, to help let them pressure test kind of what this means into the broader picture of the environment that we're in financially. And I'm all for four-family development, as long as the price is affordable. And I think that's where we fall flat. I don't care if somebody develops a four-family or a huge apartment building. What they charge is what will allow our families to live there or not.
Exactly.
So I'm less concerned about for family versus the greater. I know tons of friends who are smaller developers who want more access to City Hall to get incentives like these other developers, and I think people have lots of opinions on that. And I hope this working group has enough clout with the people in community development to actually make some of the changes in what they're doing. But I would much rather see, rather than spending, maybe the four, great, get these 4 families back online or whatever, but with the caveat that they're affordable to the families who are being priced out of our city. So the cost is key.
Okay. So any other questions or comments about that? Ms. Bolton, I'm going to ask you again if you could kind of recapture very briefly, what is it that you're hoping for tonight? What I'm hearing is that people are certainly interested, want to move forward, whatever. Are you asking us to agree to something tonight or what?
Not tonight, because I know we want to hear from our treasurer, because she'll have a better understanding and a better way to tell us what this cost might be. I think Mr. Messer's suggestion to move it to audit committee after the treasurer has had an opportunity to put the money together, or the numbers together, if you will, and what have you. So right now, I don't think we need to take a stand, but wait for what the treasurer says, what the audit committee says. But when I represent the board, I don't like to go out and try to do something that is counter to what the charge was. But in this area, it seemed to fit in the growth piece as well.
Okay, so I would say let's thank you for the presentation about it and the discussion. So what we can do is make sure that at the appropriate time, when the treasurer's ready and after you talk to audit, we can put it back on the agenda. I think that would be helpful, and we can have a more robust and at that time maybe more definitive about what actions we need to take.
Thank you, Madam President.
So I'll look for you to let us know when it comes back on the agenda. Okay.
Great, thank you.
All righty. Okay, so we're at the item for resolutions. So Mr. Borowski, please present the first resolution. We can't hear you. Tap to unmute.
All right, I had to mute you there, James, getting a little fussy periodically. So, all right, here we go. Thank you, President Jones. I would like to present a resolution allowing students to graduate from their home high school if they choose to attend Digital Academy for the 2020-2021 school year. This is the resolution I referenced earlier that would allow students, seniors, only seniors, attending CDA for their senior year to get a diploma at the end of the year from their home high school. I present the resolution as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Messer, please present the next resolution.
I do not have that in front of me.
Okay, it is regarding the adopting the board policy for requirements to wear masks. If you don't have that in front of you, maybe Mr. Morosky, can you do that one? That's policy.
Yeah, policy.
Mr. Morosky, are you able to? I need a member of policy to present the resolution. I can't hear you.
I know, I got it.
Okay.
This is a resolution adopting new board policy 5321, the requirement to wear masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19 with all of the new language as was included in your packets. I present the resolution as written.
Thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Ms. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. And then our final resolution, Mrs. Bowers, please present the resolution.
I have the resolution adopting new board policy that I'm presenting tonight, and 5466, which is the identification of students at risk of not qualifying for a high school diploma. I present this resolution as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Ms. Bolton?
I'm going to ask, and it's not the same thing, but the students at risk, I am channeling Eileen Cooper Reed and Susan Cranley and Melanie Bates and whoever else, that it's a term we don't like. It doesn't really refer to this particular thing, but again, if there was another word we could use in the title, it would make me happier, but it certainly is not going to keep me from voting for it. I just hate the phrase students at risk, students unable, students. I don't know what else to suggest. That's
Bad
one of my whatever.
Struggling.
Okay. Mr. Morosky, looks like you want to respond to that.
Offer, I try. Offer a friendly amendment to, students who may not be on track for graduating.
Boom.
Okay.
If that works, yeah.
President Jones.
I like it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Hold on. Okay. So your suggestion is the wording, students who may not be on track for graduation. Ms. Bowers.
Similar words to at risk is danger, in jeopardy of, or in danger of. But which is what Mike said, but in jeopardy of, I guess, is also an option.
Okay. So what I am hearing is that there is, I think we can move forward with the resolution. We need to revise or amend the resolution. So the question is, what is the language? Do you want to change that here on the floor, or do you want to approve the amended resolution, and ask policy to give us some user-friendly language? Ms. Bowers, you have a question?
Should the language be identification of students in jeopardy of not qualifying for a high school diploma? Can we do that on the floor?
If that's agreeable to everybody, I personally like the first one better.
In danger.
I'll go with
whichever. Yeah, but I mean,
who are not on track. Students who
on track. Yes,
may not be on track. That I would prefer that, but I think we'll go with whatever the board wants. Yes.
When I think of on track, I think of our virtual students, credit-wise. But that kind of throws me off a little bit, because that's why they're in virtual, because they're not on track for meeting the credit requirements.
Whatever I think whatever the group decides, I'm okay with, but it needs to be changed. So you all tell me what the amendment is, so I can introduce the amended version. So students who, what did you say again, Ms. Bauer? Students who are in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. Are you all okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Yes. Shake hands or something.
Yes.
Okay, let's go with that. So we have it's been motioned and seconded that we amend the resolution to reflect change in language, identification of students who are in jeopardy of not qualifying for a high school diploma. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Wagner.
Ms. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, Superintendent Mitchell, your report.
Yes, thank you. So someone will be pulling up a PowerPoint. I'll be doing a very quick update for the board on a couple of items. Just a little bit of a delay. So tonight I will be providing an update as it relates to a couple of things, but in the forefront of the presentation, I'm going to talk about the work that we're doing centered around racial equity. So, Krista, do you have the PowerPoint?
I do. It said I was sharing, but let me try one more time if you guys aren't seeing it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I see that it says you're sharing it, but I don't see anything, Krista.
I see it on mine. Anybody else see it?
I saw the PowerPoint.
Oh.
It just went off though.
Looked very nice.
I turned it off because I was and be sharing. I took it back down. Let me put it back up.
Thank you.
Yep.
There we go.
There.
Do you all see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, so it's not on my screen, so I'm flying blind. The good news is I have it printed in front of me. So, Krista, I'll just give you a cue as to when to change the slides, please. Hopefully you're on the slide that says racial equity, and there are 4 pictures, 5 pictures. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So tonight I'm going to do an update as it relates to racial equity. When I think about the passion statement around this work, thank you. Susan brought me hers.
It doesn't like
yeah, sorry. All right, anyway, so of course our board started the work on racial equity or equity, which is with the equity policy many years ago, and then the insistence of making racial equity a part of and specifically addressing disparities in our strategic plan. And so this is the issue that we feel very strongly about. 3 key messages are centered around empowering our students, access to high quality education, and also servicing our community. I think it would be a real miss for us not to include the service to our community, and so I'll explain that a little bit later. In terms of racial justice, here are some of our initial work. We have put together a student council, a parent council, which we'll be adding additional people to, a community council, and a staff council. And we thought that for the first year of the work, we would focus very specifically as it relates to policies, obviously making some suggestions or considerations to the board, and also very carefully looking at practices. And we wanted to narrow that focus in terms of looking at gaps as it relates to disparity in academics, and then practices related to discipline. In addition, we're going to focus on curriculum, and I'll talk about that in just a couple of moments, and business contracts, as well as police relations. So, Krista, I am now on the slide that says Speak Up, Speak Out. So we felt that it was really important to start this work with our students. And so we hosted 4 sessions in the months of June and July for our students, high school students, to be able to speak up and speak out regarding the civil unrest in our country, as well as what they're experiencing right here in Cincinnati and their relationships with the Cincinnati Police Department. And so you can see some of the featured guests who were able to speak. Chief Isaac was there and was able to speak in terms of the police department, as well as, and she's not listed, but Jan Michelle Lemon Kearney, councilwoman, was at a very first session to be able to hear the voice of our kids. Okay. Now I'm on the slide that says student voice. So I asked the students to give us a list of demands, and they gave us a list of demands. And so I recently received these demands, and the demands are really centered around having high school peer groups at every school focused on African American students' perspective in school. Another area is that they want to have student-led public rallies. A third area is they want Black history to be taught in the curriculum, and they want to see themselves in the curriculum. The fourth area is they want to engage civically as a organized group of students. The fifth area is that they want to build a stronger relationship with the police department. A sixth area is, and it's not listed, but it's in the document that they sent me, is that they want to see more diversity in their teaching complement. They want to see teachers who look like them. They also were very clear to make a demand that they want to meet with me regarding their demands by August 31st. And so we are working to get that meeting scheduled. What's been very refreshing is that these are it's a very vocal, smart group of young people who feel very passionately about how they believe African Americans have been treated in this country, but they do it with a level of dignity and respect that is a very mature thing to see from our young people. So I've been very impressed that they are looking for productive solutions. They aren't what people may think of as typical angry adolescents. They are angry, but they want to be productive, they want to be positive, and they want to find a way forward, which is very refreshing. One of the things that I'll bring this to you all in another presentation, but one of the questions, I attended the first 2 sessions, and they asked me to come back to the last session, and they sent me a list of questions before the session to be prepared. And the first question on their list was, why do you say that you want to address racial equity in Cincinnati, but yet we continue to see contracts go through the Treasurer's report without the representation of African American businesses? That was their first question to me. I thought, wow, they're like really calling us on the carpet in terms of how we spend our money. And so one of the presentations I want to bring back to you, and I will say that relatively soon, I will not be making these presentations as it relates to racial equity. I want our young people to set the table and to come and talk with you and present to you their collective voice. But one thing that I do want to bring back to you very soon is the fact that that was an area, you know, there's sometimes that you just start something, you just go when there's the energy around it. And so we just decided to go with this contracting piece. And so we reached out to the African American Chamber and got a list of all of the businesses that are a part of that chamber. And then we sent the African American Chamber a list of all of the services and products that we purchase. And we asked them to match it up with businesses in their organization who might be able to provide these services. And so I'm very excited, and I'll be able to bring more information back. On Monday, August the 17th, we're going to have a CPS African American Chamber pitch session. So it will start off with the opening provided by myself along with the African American Chamber President and CEO, Eric Kearney. And then we will do an introduction, And then our directors, who are the purchasers of those services and products, will then go into different virtual rooms aligned with the companies who provide those services, and the companies will be able to pitch their services to CPS. So we'll be collecting the data on this. So then I found out, well, you know what? The African American Chamber isn't the only group that everyone isn't associated with that. And so the Urban League, we're doing the same thing with businesses that are associated with the Urban League. Then there's a younger group with Mortar, so we're doing the same thing with Mortar. And we're pulling all these businesses in these different sessions together to be able to explore how they might have an opportunity to have their businesses within our district. We're also very much interested in and thought of the idea of, as we look at a lot of our large contractors, that we have a requirement of our large contractors that they subcontract with small minority businesses. And that would be another way to get more minority businesses within our district, because so many times what we will say is that we have such a big need, and the company, the minority business, isn't large enough to fill our need. But surely many of the vendors we work with are big enough and could subcontract with them, and we could make that a condition of our contract. So more to come on that issue. All right, next slide. I'm on the Student Voice Superintendent Council. So we have started to form, and I didn't choose these young people, the council. We have most of our schools filled out. We have a couple more schools we need to fill in. Gamble and Withrow are still, we're looking for students to serve on this. And so the idea is that this council will come together with me. This is not about a sit and talk about stuff. It's about exploring the landscape in Cincinnati public, how our students see it, grounding that in some research, and then identifying what they want to do and developing project plans around their 5 or 6 demands that they made to me. And so it will really be about action. Next slide, Krista. We're also working on adding more people to a parent advisory. I think it's really important that we hear the voice of the parents, that we hear the voice in terms of what do you want to see for your young people in Cincinnati public schools as it relates to racial justice. And so there will be a parent organization. And that group already started, but there are additional people we will be adding to that complement as well. Now, Krista, I'm on the community council page. So I'm going to put together a community group to be able to advise us in terms of what they are seeing as it relates to the community. And this goes back to we should be providing a service to our community, which we do, but a very specific lens in terms of racial equity. And so we're engaging the African American Chamber, NAACP, Black Lives Matter, the Urban League, all in from the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, YWCA, faith-based organization and mass action for Black liberation, to be a part of this community group, to be advising us as to what they want to see happen within our communities as it relates to our children in Cincinnati public. Then there's a staff council. And this council I'm very excited about because I did not initiate this council. So our Deputy Superintendent, Tiani Amat, and some teachers and principals and central office administrators came together and said, we want to do something, we want to get started. And we had our first session. They have really great ideas about curriculum and staffing and resource allocation. And so there's a staff council because there's a perspective that African Americans have within CPS as it relates to employment. So that closes out the councils that we're putting together, and all this will be really centered around project plans and deliverables and a scorecard. So we want to collect data to inform the work and to say, here's where we started and here's where we are now, and here's how we're benchmarking ourselves. Now I want to turn to the Cincinnati Police Department for just a moment, which is a part of that work, but also was a question that came up by one of our board members regarding how can we build a better relationship with our police department? And so I'm on the slide now. Krista says CPS CPD update. So I wanted you to know that we didn't wait until this presentation or the question was asked a second time about this. We actually started the work right after it was brought up at our board meeting. And so on June the 17th, I met with Chief Isaacs, and we talked about the Speak Up, Speak Out session, and he had a chance to engage with our young people. Then Eddie Hawkins, who is one of our SROs, had a chance to meet with Shauna Murphy on June the 26th. And I apologize, I actually met with Chief Isaacs on July the 8th after the Speak Up, Speak Out. And so he advised that I should meet with Lieutenant Henney, would be the person to connect with regarding the relationship between our youth and the police department. And so we have a tentative date scheduled with Lieutenant Henney. Other updates that I have that aren't related to the racial justice or necessarily the police department is our distribution of devices. So that has been going very well in terms of distribution of devices, which is different than the connectivity piece. And so this is just a picture of our distribution. We have over thousands of devices that have been picked up to date, and we're continuing to do that work. I'm on the Cincinnati Bell Connect Our Students page. We're still moving very much forward with connecting our students, and obviously wanting to work very hard to get more and more of our kids and our families connected to that service. I want to do a special shout out to Josh Harden. Josh, when this whole pandemic started, came and said, I really want to do something around volunteerism. And so he organized a lot of volunteer efforts that have taken place during the pandemic, whether it was actually collecting PPE, cleaning supplies, hygiene supplies, and being able to give them out at our food hubs, and has been able to raise over $50,000 in donations. Actually, when I say donation, in terms of money, not in terms of services, in-kind services or actual products. So a big thank you for Josh Harden for all the work that he's done. And that concludes my report, in addition to the recommendations that I have. I do have one thing that I want to point everyone to in the superintendent's recommendations. You will hopefully note that there are 8 teachers who were originally a part of the RIF thing, who are reduction in force, who have been reinstated. And so we're excited about that. So 2 math teachers resigned, and so we were able to bring 2 teachers back into those positions. And then we had 6 of our teachers who were a reduction in force agreed to apply for a license to service their students with disabilities. So that is very exciting to be able to bring more people back, because as I said before, it pains us all very much to have to reduce our force. And so that now concludes my superintendent's report. Thank you.
Okay, do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Morosky, Ms. Bolton, followed by Ms. Bolton.
I just have a brief comment to the superintendent. That was an awesome update, and all of the work that's been going on this summer, in addition to all the COVID stuff regarding the racial justice, is just really, really great. And I hope that there's a way that news can be pushed out into the community, because as folks are looking to do things and people are looking to rally behind something, I really feel like this is we are a hallmark of our district, and it's something we've led on for years, well before I got here, but really turning it up. And I just want to say kudos, and I appreciate all the updates. I believe I was likely the unnamed board member for a couple of the points, and I wanted to give you as much time as possible. And so thank you so much for the update, for what you're doing. And I know it goes without saying, however we can support you, we have your back, and most importantly, have the kids' backs. I too have been really impressed with their demands and the way they're making themselves heard. They're doing a much better job than I did when I was their age, and so I want to be a part of it. So thanks, Superintendent.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, very quickly, I appreciate the update. The history teacher in me, though, is also saying, let's not think that anything started today. The children and students have a tendency, rightfully so, that the day in the history began when they raised the issue. There has been extensive work in minority employment, minority contracting, extensive efforts done in curriculum that indeed is reflective largely because students approached you a few years ago about we want to see ourselves in the curriculum. That's the one caution. I'd like us to start where we are. We have a far way to go, but I also don't want ever our students to think that the history began when they raised the issue. A lot of people have worked long and hard on all of this. I think it's great. I'm worried about a public rally before we have the kinds of meetings that we need to have. So that's of interest to me and concern. Also, one of the things I think they probably, and we all need to know, is that within the Finance Committee or Audit Committee, I know we've been monitoring, but not as successfully as we used to, the minority contracting. And that needs to be done. And I will also, even though this is not what the national mood is about, I am going to say again, you have to also look at female-owned contracting facilities and organizations and what have you, because that whole minority hiring goes well beyond not only our school district boundaries, but it also goes well beyond within the African American community. I love that you are meeting with the African American Chamber. I think that's a tremendous partnership. And I think, too, rebuilding or re-evaluating the relationship between Cincinnati Police Department and CPS is very useful. I'm a huge supporter of what we do already, and I know that can be improved. So hats off to the kids. I spent 36 years worrying and listening to teenagers, and they're actually smarter than most of us. So I'm anxious to hear that student voice. But again, history didn't begin when they started to worry about it. There's a history, and that'll teach them, and it'll teach us as to how we've been successful, but also how we've failed, and have not been as excellent as we need to be.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Messer.
Yeah, I was going to actually say something similar in that the good news is we agree with these students. If the first thing they were asking is about our contracts, because one of my last meetings on my last term on the Finance Committee was reviewing every single contract.
Right.
And I believe I think we were pushing to say, how can we make our spend reflect the diversity of our students? I remember that being a comment. And then I also stated that the people who are doing business with us should reflect the diversity and inclusion practices in our values as depicted in our equity statement. So I think, we have to keep that work going forward, but I think this is where we are fully aligned kind of comment. I think it's really exciting, though. I love this cross-community, cross-stakeholder group. I mean, nothing's going to make me happier than seeing our students come in and present. This is how they become world influencers that our superintendent so eloquently talks about. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers.
Thank you, Superintendent. That was very informative. And I know in our current state and status of our country and our nation regarding racial equity, I do not want to omit the presence and the voice of our Latino families, nor the reach out to our Latino coalition to be a part of that big group when you were identifying those groups that you were meeting with. Just because I do know that this is Eve has said this work has started way before now, and I know that the climate has kind of intensified it recently, but I just want to make sure that is diversified for all of our students that are representative, especially our African Americans, but in addition to our Latino families.
Okay. Mr. Lindy?
Thanks, President Jones. I think, Superintendent, I just want to first say thank you. I thought it was incredibly informative and incredibly helpful. I also wanted to say I can only imagine how challenging it is to try to manage two crises at the same time. both of which, I mean, I think COVID is larger than anything I could have possibly imagined when I was running for school board. And then on top of that, the summer of reckoning around racial justice we've had at the same time. I want to say I appreciate your leadership. I wanted to offer a couple of specific, really positive things I thought were great. I love the student council and the parent council so that those voices are informing our direction. I think that's great. I love the different system levers that you and your team are looking at, from the diversity of our contracts to how do we use data and accountability and scorecards across the system. I thought those things were just great. I had one possible point of clarification on the SRO issue. It may be the case that multiple board members were asking about this. To the extent that you were referencing me, I just wanted to share, I don't think there's an obvious answer for what we do here or an obvious diagnosis of whether we actually have a problem at all or not. I think one of the things that was so complicated was there was such a mix of feedback from some people saying, we got to get police out, to other people saying, I think we have a really, really good SRO program. You know, and so I think just I appreciate the research. I think it's really important. I just wanted to say that from my perspective, I think it's also like important to look at, you know, are we actually just really happy with this current situation? And the answer might be, we looked at it and yes. And then I think the last one is just one idea. I think that teachers and principals are going to be trying to figure out how do they engage their students in the first couple weeks and months of school around what's been going on in the country this summer. And I think there are going to be all kinds of inspiring examples that come out of what those teachers and principals are doing. And I think it could be exciting in a board meeting to highlight a couple of them. Again, if you don't think that's the best use of time, I would defer to you on that. But I was trying to think of like, how can we lift up leaders within CPS who are really doing inspiring work here with children? And it seemed like possibly highlighting that in some upcoming board meetings could be a neat thing. But chiefly, I wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. I will say that in terms of the conversation and relationship with the police, the young people indicated that they want them in the schools. They just want a positive relationship with them. And so I'm going to get the SROs and the students in the same room together so that we can talk about it. I will say in terms of how teachers talk about this with their young people, what I don't want to do is script this so much. I want to hear the voice of our young people. So what I want to do is ask them, how do you want to talk about this? And how do you want your teacher to support you? And have that council and that group help steer the work so that it's authentic and it's real and it meets what our kids want and not just what adults think that they want or what they need.
Okay. Let me just say, we are 3 hours. And I'm sorry, but I really feel like we need to move the agenda. So please keep your comments short. Please, Ms. Bolton.
Very quickly, I do not want our teachers, to the point that the superintendent just mentioned, I do not want our teachers to use our children to forward their agendas either, because we have witnessed that in the past. I want to hear from the kids. I want to hear from our students. So I think we have to be very leery of people using our kids, because they have the pure of mind and thought, and that's I don't want them to be used by other people.
Thank you. Mr. Lindy, final comment? Mr. Lindy?
No, I'm good, President Jones. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on. I need a motion to approve the recommendations of the superintendent?
So moved.
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. Okay. I need a motion to approve the report of the treasurer.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? Second. Thanks. Any discussion? Ms. Bolton, followed by Ms. Bowers.
Only one question. I have a question of the treasurer's regarding, I think it's in maybe Roman numeral, oh gosh, 2. It's about Pleasant Hill Academy's resource coordinator or whatever, the Gaskins and Associates, $35,500. I looked up Gaskins and Associates and I could only find somebody from like Georgia. And the 32.5 seems lower than resource coordinators are paid. I just needed some clarification. We've invested a lot of time and effort in that campus. It's an environmental science campus, and I just need to know who Gaskins is.
So Gaskins has been in the district, and maybe if Miss Mercy's on the line, she can talk about that company. The reason the value is so low is because it's only 90 days. Remember, we're working under a 90-day appropriation.
Right.
Now, there is an RFP out on the street, and so because it was time to RFP the services again, and so that'll come up soon too. I think Ms. Murphy's ready to talk about Gaskins.
Great,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Yes, the Gaskins Foundation is led by Whitney Gaskins, who is a STEM professor at the University of Cincinnati. This is her foundation. They've been working with Pleasant Hill for the past year and are looking to expand into additional schools in our district. So the environmental science fits with their STEM focus.
Are they also the ones that are at Mount Auburn or Taft School?
No, they are looking to expand to Houston and to Evanston.
Hughes and STEM. Okay. All right. So that explains the 32.5, and they're looking for 2 other schools.
Correct.
Is the reality also that we're actually paying? They're not necessarily contributing any money?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the reality.
They are providing additional services through their collaboratives and backgrounds.
Thank you.
Ms. Bowers?
Yes, I just have a question for Jen, Ms. Wagner. On page 9, I think Roman numeral 5, and on page 10, Roman numeral D, they look like duplicates. Can you verify that? And it looks like another duplicate for Roman numeral 5B and Roman numeral 5F. And they just look like they're repetitive things. And maybe I'm reading this wrong.
No, so it is confusing. And you're talking about letter A, Mr. Harner Services, the $4,000 then and now?
No, on page 9, Roman numeral 5, Cincinnati Children's Hospital, $5,835, and then on page 10, Roman numeral 5, number D. They look like the same.
It is a duplicate. My apologies.
Okay. And similarly on page 10, Roman numeral B, Roman numeral 5B, and then page 11, Roman numeral 5F look the same.
It's very likely. We're still doing these manually because of the 90-day appropriations. So, my apologies.
Okay, so the question is not really that we're paying. The question is it's just a
duplicate of
recording. We're not paying them double. That's yeah. Is that right?
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
We're not paying them double.
All right. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. So did I have a motion already?
Yes.
Motion. Okay. Second. Thank you. We're at vote. Ms. Wagner.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton? Ms. Bolton? We lose you?
The dogs were barking, so I had to mute. They're looking at a groundhog. Aye.
Mrs. Bowers.
Aye.
Mr. Lindy.
Aye.
Mr. Messer.
Aye.
Mr. Morosky.
Yes.
President Jones.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, any inquiries and updates? I have a couple of very short ones. Any inquiries and updates? Okay, just a reminder that if you haven't already checked on your calendars, fill us in a doodle out to find out when we could schedule the joint meeting with Cincinnati Preschool Promise. And I'm asking board members to do that like tonight or tomorrow so we will know. Just to let you know, it looks like, or if you want to pull your calendars, it looks like the 23rd of September and the 28th is when most people can be there in the evening. And if that's the case, I want to offer those 2 dates to Preschool Promise, and we'll finalize one of those dates.
September 23rd and September 28th. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
What time?
In the evening.
I know. You
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
5-ish or 6-ish or something like that.
Okay.
Looks great.
Yes, I think there's a district-wide LSDMC meeting on the 23rd.
We aren't there, are we? We're not there. September 23rd.
You're talking about, are we at LSDMC?
Yeah.
But I mean, why would that interfere with us?
Because some board members go to that. But I mean, I'm just saying, if it's
okay. Well, here's my concern. I really would like to offer Cincinnati Preschool Promise 2 dates. So we have to go with either we have to go. It looks like that most people are available on the 23rd and the 28th. If it should happen to be the 28th, that's fine. But I got to give them 2 because they also have to
go for it. Go for it.
Okay. All right. Okay. And okay. So that's that. And then also, Ms. Bolton, you had stated that the Finance Committee was going to go back to its schedules. And so
yes,
that was a good email. It was timely. But
thank you.
Because I think all the other committees might want to consider their schedules, going back to their normal schedules, and making sure that you make the connections. And then you all the committees have to decide whether to be virtual or in-house. So all of that needs to be talked about, and then work with staff around that.
That'd be great. Yes, it's our hope that we can reestablish the previous calendar at the third Thursday at 1:30. Is similar to what SAC and policy are doing, which is 2 committees on the same day as we had arranged, and it would be 11:30 and 1:30. But yeah, and then we have to figure out if we're doing virtual or we're doing in person.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you. All right. Any assignments? And I see you, Mr. Morosky. Go ahead. You can go ahead with yours. Let me just say, Melanie faded out. She lost connection, so she sent me her assignment. But go ahead, Mr. Morosky.
Thank you, President Jones. I meant to bring this up in the presentation of my minutes. It's very small. I apologize. But for Phyllis, under the continued discussion, new policy 2255, anti-racism, it references a quote, first draft of this document at August 7th, 2020 meeting twice. That date should be July 10th, 2020. That's it. So again, August 7th, 2020 reference under continued discussion, anti-racism should read July 10th, 2020.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Ms. Bates' assignment, I'm just going to read it to you. It is to administration to engage partners to have a fundraising campaign around the renaming of CDA to honor Jack Gilligan, to build the capacity of CDA to make it a state-of-the-art school over and above the ability of CPS to fund this? Okay. All right. Any other assignments? Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I would only like to amend Melanie's to say a state-of-the-art and statewide for Jack Gilligan, the Digital Academy. And for a new assignment, I have received a request from the Cincinnati folks. They have a panel on education, as you know, and they would like, if it's possible, to Treasurer Wagner, could we send to that panel some information regarding the preschool levy that is scheduled? Updates, because they're going to be having their panel discussion in August. So I can give you the where to send it and who's on the panel.
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay. Any other assignments? Any other assignments? Okay. I need a motion to recess into executive session for consideration of preparations for conducting or reviewing negotiations, security matters, purchase of property, sale of property, employment of a public official, and pending or imminent court action.
Gracious.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is that a roll call, Ms. Wagner?
Yeah, but I missed, who made the original motion?
Mr. Morosky.
Thank you. Okay, and Mrs. Bates is not with us? Okay.
Right.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Lindy?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. We'll take a 5-minute. Our business meeting is adjourned. We can close out. We'll take a 5-minute break. Thanks.